we've had it. Yeah, I mean, another fine AJ product.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Are we live? We're live. I think. I've got a video, and Steve's not a part of it.
Yes.
Oh, wait. There
Are we
he
live?
is. Oh, you're right here next to me. Oh, hey. Oh, I didn't see you there.
All right.
Man.
Welcome, Facebook Live. Sorry for and for those tuning in on YouTube, we had some technical difficulties with the audio for Facebook, so we appreciate for all of you that are out there listening live, which we do every week. This week it's Whiskey Wednesday.
Amen.
Next week it'll be Thirsty Thursday.
Thirsty Thursday.
And that's where we're going to be, except for one date in October. So we'll keep you guys up to
Good.
date. But I want to welcome in for Jake Sanders, Dustin Bovey.
Thank you.
Face around
Thank
the
you.
garage and on the podcast. And
Dustin,
Behind the
welcome.
camera. And behind the camera.
And behind the camera, where you belong. No, I'm just kidding. And then also, as it says,
Still a dick.
Yeah. Nothing's changing there. Josh Bentley. So, Josh
Hey, guys.
from Altadis USA.
Yes, sir.
And no one can hear me now. Perfect. This is awesome. All right, there you go. Now you should be good. I see it. Check. Oh,
Good?
all right, we're good.
Good.
Now I'm going to share it, now that we have two people, and I think they're all in the room. So I'm going to share it right now.
That's
And,
what I just did.
Okay. Then, Dustin, I'm going to leave you to kind of go over what we're drinking to the Facebook crowd and the YouTube crowd before we do the audio, what we're drinking, smoking, and then also who our sponsors are, if you don't mind.
So tonight we are enjoying a nice glass of EH Taylor Straight Rye. We've had a couple other EH Taylor products on previous episodes. This is their Straight Rye rendition. It's one of the 11 to 12 different products that EH Taylor puts out as part of the Buffalo Trace line. We are smoking the H. Upmann 175th anniversary. Thanks to Mr. Bentley here. So
Yes,
really
sir.
excited to dig into that, see how the two pair together. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Tinder Box at Easton. Always a great atmosphere, always a great shop, great people that work there, minus a couple here in the shop or in the garage.
You tried and you failed.
I did. I crashed and burned. BS Cigar Company and Altadis USA.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Josh and Paul Waller.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thanks, Paul.
Great to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Great to have you guys supporting it.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of other people who are reaching out about that, so that's also very great.
Well,
So, really
what's so
thankful.
cool is, it was a little bit over a year ago, I think, that we were in the old garage.
It was.
Yeah. We were just sitting in the audience, and I just started with the company and made my way onto that podcast. That was a good episode. I couldn't
You
stay.
couldn't. We took a brief break and was getting ready to get into the topic of family, and you're just sitting there kind of pacing back and forth. Like,
Oh, man.
you walked up to the table, like, you need something, Josh? You need a drink? No. Can I get in? Yeah. Pull up a chair.
That was cool. That was
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
It's been too long, though. It's been too long, so I'm glad.
agree.
Thank you guys for having me on. It's exciting to
Brother, you're always welcome.
be a part of this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Almost there.
Almost.
This is the night of technical difficulties because Josh is part of our sponsorship, and that's when things go wrong. So it makes sense. And Dustin's on. Which
Yeah,
thanks.
seems to be every time I'm on, something goes wrong
Yeah, we'll see.
or
you around
does not
Christmas.
work. Yeah, keep an eye on that 2-hour mark.
Well, it makes you
Seems
just
to-
want to try harder, and that's when you end up falling on your face a little bit.
I don't have to try; that just happens naturally. Kathy can tell you that from personal experience. So,
All right. I think we're good to go. So thank you guys for bearing with us here, but we're going to get started here. The topic tonight is trends versus tried and true. So let's get started. If you're ready to go, Nate, as he lights up the cigar, that's the producer for you. Sits back, lights up the cigar.
Amen.
Are you going to do the ding?
I'm going to attempt here.
All right. Go ahead. That was it?
Yeah, it's rocks glass. Glencairns have a nice, better ring to them.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Happy Whiskey Wednesday this week. Sorry to be so confusing to everyone out there, but if you guys are tuning into the audio, it is, I don't know, what's Friday? Or any day you're listening. Could be Whiskey Friday?
Except it's Wednesday.
Well, shoot. we getting anything there? I don't know, man.
That's odd for his to be faint.
Test. I can hear it click on there. Is that any better? Start the audio again, please. I'm going to do some editing this week.
Yeah.
Test. Give Dustin another chance? Yeah, give it another chance. We've got 23 people waiting for us to start this thing.
It just doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Happy Whiskey Wednesday, everyone. We want to thank everyone for tuning in this week. We've got Dustin Bovey here in the studio filling in for Jake Sanders. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes,
glad to be here.
Welcome back on. And then Josh Bentley from Altadis USA.
Yes, sir.
I say this. I feel like I'm not the only one. Like maybe arguably the best dressed in the industry.
Ooh.
Is it top? I mean, top 5 at least.
Top 5.
Top 5. You
I'll
have no doubt on the top 5, and it's a big industry
man.
too.
Yeah.
So top 5, we'll say, and self-proclaimed top 5 as well.
I appreciate that.
No, you're always very sharply dressed. We want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. We are going to be smoking something very special that Josh brought with us, the H. Upmann 175th, 175 years, so 175th anniversary.
175.
H. Upmann, made by AJ Fernandez.
AJ Fernandez,
and Josh will get into that a little bit. And then we're also going to be, this is a gift that is a gift bottle from Josh and Altadis. I think from you, really.
From me.
Yeah.
About a year and a half ago.
Over a year ago, and he didn't think I'd hold on to it until the next time he was on. I didn't think it was going to be that long, so luckily I moved, and it's been in my basement. I haven't even looked at it.
Good.
But yeah, the EH Taylor Straight Rye, which is one of my favorite ryes out there. We kind of get back to that a lot of times, and I'll say EH Taylor Straight Rye, and then Willet 3-year rye is always kind of my good rye whiskeys that I feel like I can never get my hands on because the 3 years gone, Willet. And this is just very difficult to come by. So yeah. So thank you very much. Tonight we're going to be talking about trends versus tried and true, which we didn't even know how relevant that would be with going into the EH Taylor Straight Rye. So we'll find out a bit more about that, and then also with the relevancy to the cigar industry with 175 years. I'd say that's tried and true right there.
Tried and true, baby.
So we'll get into more topic about that. So I wanted to thank our sponsors, Josh being part of one of them, the one of the major sponsors, Altadis USA, which is H. Upmann, as we're talking about, Romeo Julieta, Monte Cristo, Butera, go on.
St. Louis Ray.
Oh, nice. This is a test. He didn't know he was going to be tested tonight.
I didn't know I was going to be tested.
Pop quiz.
Trinidad.
Yeah.
Aging Room.
Nice.
You already said Butera.
I did.
We have Henry Clay.
Henry Clay making a huge comeback.
Yes, yep. Trinidad as well, as I had already mentioned, making another huge comeback. A big comeback.
Nice.
And, of course, H. Upmann, if we didn't already say that.
We've said it a few times, but I don't know about in this. Yeah, so thank you very much to Altadis. Also, we have Tinder Box at Easton, which this whole thing came out of Tinder Box at Easton. Everyone in this garage is basically part of that community, which is kind of what this whole podcast has been formulated upon, is getting together for good smokes, good drinks typically follow, and then also good conversation about life. So thank you, Tinder Box at Easton, for the weekly featured cigar. This week, Altadis is just coming through and just throwing all the good stuff at us, so we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And then also be a Cigar Company. I believe there's a couple floating around the garage, as always. In fact, there's like half a smoked one in the ashtray, and then Nate's got a couple. So, and then also that brings up Nate Hale. Thank you for being the producer, mixer, all-star DJ.
I don't know about that last
turntables
part,
back there.
Yeah. I can run a soundboard.
You can run a soundboard. Perfect. So let's get started with, since Josh is our esteemed guest, let's get started with the H. Upmann. You start talking about that so I can actually light this up, because I've never had this cigar yet, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, light it up, man.
All right.
So H. Upmann celebrating the 175th anniversary. I mean, that's something special. That really is a major feat. Herman Upmann came over from Germany with his brother and started the H. Upmann Bank in Cuba. and by happenstance came upon a factory, a cigar factory, and kind of fell in love and I guess you could say acquired a passion for cigars. And so here we are 175 years later, enjoying what is our commemorative cigar, something really special that we're going to be smoking tonight. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's made at AJ Fernandez Factory in Esteli, Nicaragua. The composition. So what's special about this? AJ really pulled out all the stops. He blended it with I just lost my train of thought
Nicaraguan?
there. In Nicaragua,
Yes.
with Rafael Nadal, right?
Which I always
Yep.
have to say is not the tennis player.
Not the tennis
Because it's
player.
real close.
Yes,
It's real close.
Rafa, who is playing tonight, I believe.
Is he?
Yeah. Boutiques blends, and so they blended this cigar. What is so special about this cigar is it utilizes a medio tempo wrapper. Okay, so to explain what that is, the top of the tobacco plant creates a flower, right?
Right.
And oftentimes they'll remove this flower. 1 in every 12 plants produces enough of this leaf, so it's on top of the lajero.
1 in 12 plants, so that's
1
not on
in
all.
12 plants. And so to use this leaf as a wrapper is something very, very special.
It's a bold move.
It
It's a
is.
very bold move.
So then let's
We'll see
take
how
it
it
one
plays out.
step further, as AJ would do, and he ferments it. It's a 3-year fermentation process, and this is how they do it. This is what's special about it. So they take in the pilons, right, and they put down broadleaf, right, wetted broadleaf, and
From
sandwich
Nicaragua or
from
Connecticut? Do we know?
You stumped me with that.
Yeah.
They use
'Cause I-
broadleaf, Steve.
I
They use broadleaf.
I'm not trying to stump you. I mean, this is something that I think when I think broadleaf, a lot of times it has been really mainly Connecticut, but
Correct.
anymore they're doing it in Nicaragua. They're doing it. I mean, it's a tobacco that isn't commonly used everywhere. So, but
Right,
okay,
right.
Go on.
But
I was just curious.
you've seen it, right? You've seen
I
it
have.
in Connecticut.
I was
just
at your
recently
fields
got back.
actually
Yeah,
in Connecticut.
yeah. So let's say Connecticut broadleaf that he is sandwiching in with the medio tempo wrapper, and that goes through a fermentation. 3 years they do that. Wet down the broadleaf, sandwich it in with the medio tempo, and I mean, basically what happens over those 3 years is that broadleaf is almost disintegrated. So they are throwing away
Really?
that Connecticut broadleaf. So I mean that's how much goes in to this fermentation process over 3 years. So it really is something special, and when you smoke it, you see why.
So you say
Yeah.
the fermentation process for that is 3 years. What's the average fermentation process? Is it around 3 years for just about everyone? Is it 3 years kind of an extended amount of time for this particular cigar?
It really ranges, right? It really
Yeah.
ranges the in what type of tobacco they're using, right, and what the cigar is, right? Anywhere from 6 months all the way to years, 3 years, for this in particular.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know. It
Yes,
was,
something more than that, but I mean that 3 years is a beefy time. I feel
That-
like,
that-
I mean, that's a
especially
long
with
time.
this technique.
I mean,
This is the first time I've heard of that technique, and I don't know if it's out there with anyone else doing it, but I have not heard of utilizing like a broadleaf over this. And it's Nicaraguan.
Nicaraguan, yeah,
Habano.
Nicaraguan filler
Yep.
and binder, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, really something special. Now, a real quick caveat: only comes in one size, the size that we're smoking, as it would be the Churchill, the 7x50.
Love this size. I love this
classic
Makes two
H.
of us.
Upmann size. And so you can get this at Tinder Box.
One of many stores. One thing I don't think you mentioned, unless I was too busy worrying about the technical difficulties earlier, but it is one of 14,750 boxes. Is that
That's correct?
Ballparking it?
That's yep. You're
just
spot
shy
on.
Just shy of 15,000 boxes of 10. So
Yep.
it is a limited release because of, I think, the technique they're using.
Yeah.
It comes in, this beautiful box you guys have out here on the table.
The box is absolutely stunning.
It's very cool. Very cool. But it is something that it's interesting to me that technique was used. You guys, with Altadis, a lot of your brands, Upmann, Monte Cristo, Romeo, I'm trying to think who else, Trinidad, you're utilizing AJ Fernandez. He is definitely a part of a strong part of your portfolio recently, which I love to see. I absolutely love to see. And I will say this, not to get too cheeky with the whole topic and everything like that, but it's funny because, when we're talking about the tried and true thing, it's the 175th year of this. Now, granted, that goes back to the Cuban heritage, which you guys do have, and I'm not going to get into all the details unless people have questions out there on Facebook, but you guys have a hand on the Habanos type stuff through your parent company.
Yeah, our parent company, a joint venture with the Cuban government.
As far as with that current status, which I know there's news that might change, we don't need to get into that much, but I will say that it's interesting that there was some lineage there onto the Cuban side, as opposed to what a lot of people think. It's just like, oh, they use the same name and it's not the real thing and all that stuff. It's like, no, there's a lot of heritage here, and I like that you're doing that. So there's the tried and true, and then obviously the trend in the industry, for the people out there that are into the cigar world, is that AJ Fernandez is the hot hand right now. Mm-hmm. So to be able to meld both of those worlds together, where you have something that you got a guy in Nicaragua that is just blowing up and has been for a while, and a company like yours is able to recognize that, and then to put that, when you're going to put someone's hands on a tried and true brand, like 175 years later, you're like, you know what? I know who I want to blend with this.
Yeah.
We're going to get this done by someone that is just absolutely hot right now, that actually does have 3 generations, I think, in the industry. He's 3rd generation, but I think it's really cool. Yeah,
it's pretty neat. A strategic partnership with AJ, and hats off to Rafael, because what he brings to our company is pretty neat. That relationship that he has with both AJ and Nestor Plasencia, because we don't have operations in Nicaragua, so that that's what's so neat, to be able to have that strategic partnership, or that strategic partner in Nicaragua.
Yeah, at this point,
and
you
have that
basically
availability.
do.
Yeah,
you basically do at this point, working with these guys. You know what I mean? It's like by way of them, but you guys are blowing it up with Nicaraguan tobacco.
Yeah,
and Nicaraguan. The Espada with Monte Cristo, which we've had on here. Yep. There's a lot of good ones that you guys are doing, in my opinion, that you're utilizing not only Nicaraguan tobacco, but now you're using factories and talented people from that country.
Absolutely.
I think everything that you guys have put out recently has just been absolutely lights out, to use Grimsley's term here.
Brad
it's
Grimsley.
Just made absolutely phenomenal. But in regards, so there were, 15,000 boxes made?
You're way off. There was 14,750, but yeah,
okay.
You were.
So that's 14,750.
Price is Right rules. You're out.
Shit. So I still have, thankfully, 5 Monte Cristo 80ths. Yeah. And there was only 3,000 boxes of those made.
That sounds about
right. A lot
right.
more limited than the 175th, but that one was still phenomenal.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Yeah,
I managed to get my hands on one of the boxes, which, just like this one, is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so beautiful.
All right, so let's talk about this before we move. I haven't even taken a sip of whiskey tonight, because
this is one of your favorites anyways.
I know. I just want to make sure that this is. I wanted to taste this on kind of a fresher palate. So, what do you guys got? Josh, you're the guest here. You're the one that brought this. What do you get out of this? How many of these have you smoked?
This is my 2nd.
So you smoked the first one at the trade show?
At the trade show, okay. Yep.
So how does this compare? At the trade show, you're smoking your brains out.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And you're in a huge room, but, if anyone's been out there, it's a huge room at, where was that, the Sands Conference
Sands
again?
Expo Center, yeah.
And it gets smoky. It's surprisingly smoky, and, for those of you that are in the industry, you don't mind it. For other people, it might be like, oh, that's terrible. I remember when I was there a few years ago, some of the the people working some of the food court area or like on the
Yeah.
side. I don't know if it was like that this year, but they were like, "Yeah, this is different. This is a lot different than what
This
we're
is
used
awful.
to."
This
yeah.
is awful.
It's great, but when you're smoking that many cigars in a day, when you smoke like you're like, and Tyler's been out there. Tyler Jones is here in the garage, but when you smoke something at like 4:30 as the expo's starting to come to a close that day, and like you get to that booth and they're like, "Hey, try this," and you're smoking it. And I remember there was one, I'm not going to mention it, but there was something where I'm just like, "Man, this is great." And I looked over at Brian and he's like, "Yeah, this is great." We smoked it like 2 days later and we're like, "That's all right." But we were just so smoked out. It wasn't a bad cigar, but it was like it outpowered the previous ones that we had so much flavor after 7-8 cigars that day on the floor, talking and all that stuff, walking around, all the other cigars going. The aromas are just all over the place.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I mean, so how does this compare, though, for you now smoking it here on the garage?
So, I mean, a totally different experience, and that's what, smoking a cigar is all about. It's about the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm definitely glad that I get to try a second one because, as we were talking, this is pretty limited.
Very.
So, as the sales team, we were only given one of these, and unfortunately, I used mine up. And I kind of wish I would have waited. Because, as you alluded to, I mean, we're just smoking so many cigars out there.
Yeah.
And, so getting back to it, this is a lot better experience. Dustin and I were talking, what we were getting out of this before we lit it up.
Yeah.
And a lot of dark cocoa that we're
Yeah.
getting out of it. Some like tart fruit.
Yeah, kind of like
Is
a
that
raspberry.
the smell or the cold draw or what?
That was a cold draw.
cold
yeah.
draw.
Yeah, cold
Yeah.
draw. I got a lot of dark chocolate, kind of like a tart fruit, like Josh said. Raspberry notes, kind of that tartar fruit, raspberry, blackberry, cherries.
I believe you said Blasberry.
I did say blasberry. I had a little.
Crossbreed. How much
Yeah.
have you had to drink?
Not enough.
All right.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it pairs excellent with this EH Taylor. I mean, it really does.
Paul Waller says he'll send you some more, by the way.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Paul Waller's on tonight,
I'll
by
get
the way.
in line with that.
Yes, yeah. And, hey,
EH Taylor.
real quick, a quick minute. I'm
Wow.
so glad that down South Florida, I'm glad that they got missed.
No
they
kidding.
they caught a break and
Yeah.
and so really happy about that. I'm glad that
And we
it
should have
missed.
said something. I mean, best wishes and, prayers and thoughts, positivity to the Bahamas especially.
Bahamas, yeah.
Carolina's coming up. They're supposed to
Yeah.
be getting hit.
But I think that was the worst of it from what I've seen is Bahamas. So that's
Yeah.
that's
Oh.
very, very tragic, and
Yep.
hope that we see some rebuilding there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up,
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah. But we're getting asked, is it Maduro? We said it's medio tempo. And medio tiempo, again, for those coming in late, is the highest priming. Doesn't come on every tobacco plant. And typically it's used, if I'm not mistaken, Josh, you tell me if I'm off on your knowledge there, but you said it's rarely used as a wrapper. I mean, it is a filler leaf that is even not always used.
That's correct.
So if a cigar has medio tiempo in it, it's going to be in the filler, and typically that is a stronger and yet flavorful leaf because of the size.
Correct. Yeah.
Where Ligero is known to be
again,
powerful, but not as
right.
flavorful.
Right. And I mean, going back, a couple of years, it was, I don't want to say confused as Ligero, but I mean, oftentimes it was thought of as Ligero.
Yeah.
And I believe, as of the last couple of years, I mean, again, hats off to what AJ is doing down there and what Raphael did with him. To be able to utilize this as wrapper makes it all the more special.
Especially
Really
on a
does.
Churchill.
Yeah.
Just the size of leaves that have to be used for that.
It's a lot
Right.
of cigar to cover.
It is.
I mean, 1 in 12 plants. I mean, for anybody who has been able to see, the farms and see it just brings a whole new appreciation and, really tells, the tale of this special H. Upmann 175th anniversary.
Nate, what'd you want to say? Hey, get on there. He's making faces.
No, I was
at
just
me
saying
here.
it's got quite a bit of spice on the retrohale,
It does.
which is why I think it pairs well with the EH Taylor Straight Rye.
I think it does too. And in fact, I haven't had EH Taylor Straight Rye in a while. But I did take a sip finally, and that's not completely different. Now, granted, we did crack this the last time Josh was in the garage, and that was over a year ago. So for those that that have the opinion that a bottle, once you crack it, you uncork it, and then you let it sit, you know what I mean? It does change a bit. But, I mean, I don't know about you guys with this, but it definitely pairs well, like you guys said.
I think it definitely pairs well. I know when I took a drink of the EH Taylor, which we can get into that here in a little bit, I get a lot of pepper. My palate gets coated with a lot of faint spice.
Normally?
Not normally, but with the cigar.
Okay.
With the cigar. I get a lot of pepper. I get some pepper from the actual cigar itself, but when you pair it with the EH Upmann, the spices in that rye kind of really expands that peppery flavor on my palate. I don't know if either of you guys get that, Josh, or
Yeah, I get a lot of black pepper.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Earthiness on the retrohale. I think a lot of dark chocolate.
All right, I got to ask, what do you mean by earthiness?
I was about to say the same
here we
thing.
go.
We can't. We can't go past the earthiness part. What does that taste like to you, Josh?
What does that taste like to me?
And it is a very commonly used thing on a lot of, like, wine, whiskey, cigars. It's out there. So
Is it like dry moss?
No,
I would say.
Or is that an industry term, or is that?
I'm going to get in it. I think it's an industry term.
Right.
But I was at an event last week, and somebody came up to me at the event, and they said this. They said, "So tell me about this cigar." And so I started.
This one or another one?
It was a cigar.
It was a cigar.
It was a cigar.
Okay.
So it wasn't this one in particular. It was one out of my portfolio, and they said, "Tell me about this cigar." And so I started to tell them, and they said, "No. Tell me what flavors you get out of it." I said, "Well, listen." I said, "This is what I want you to do.
It's always
I want you to purchase this cigar.
Well, listen.
I want you to light it up, and then I want you to come back and tell me what you get out of it." Right?
There it is.
Because everybody's palate is different.
Absolutely.
Right? And so what I might get out of it, hey, I'll throw you the sales pitch. I'm going to tell you, hey, you're going to get deep, dark chocolate notes, a roasted espresso. This is going to be, in your top 5 cigars, and they're going to be wowed. And then when they go and their palate gets something different, they're going to be completely disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So I'm going to switch it up on you. So if you see me at an event and you ask that question, I'm going to tell you to buy the cigar, and I'm going to tell you to go light it and come back and tell me what you get out of it.
So you are just from here on out not going to learn anything about your cigars in your portfolio and just let your customers tell you about it.
You're taking it
I
completely
love that.
wrong
No,
way.
that's a brilliant sales technique. That's amazing.
Well, I guess if you look at it that
That's some
way.
great customer service right there.
Now listen,
What kind of mileage does this car get? You know what? Let's go for a test drive. Hey, reset that meter on there. You know what I mean? The average miles per gallon. You tell me what the miles per gallon is.
I'm going to take a cruise from
gas
Columbus to Indianapolis.
Is it good? Is it bad? That's all relative for you.
Yeah, that's it. Listen, I'm telling you what, I can tell you what I get out of it.
Yeah.
But that's what my palate gets out of it. Your palate might be completely different. Dustin said, "Hey, listen, I get this tart raspberry." I took a drink of the EH Taylor, and I was like, you know what? Hey, contraire, I get a tart cherry. So to each his own, right?
You got tart.
Yeah. It was a bit tart. So I think we were on the same. But everybody's palate is going to get something different. So when I say an earthiness,
back to the question. You tell me what earthiness
I just
means.
switched it up on you. I'm going back. Back to the earthiness. When I say earthiness, you could take it 100 different ways, right? You could take it a peatiness like you get out of a scotch. You can take it like a mineral, right, that you get out of what I would say a white wine, Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Grigio. And believe me, I get into all these. Like I love the pairing and the notes that you get out of it. But I just an all encompassing. So if I get mineral, if I get a grassiness, if I get a peatiness, I'm calling it earthy.
Okay.
I like it.
What do you think about that?
I think, you smoking it, you tell me what you get out of it. I think that's exactly what happened right there. I love that technique still.
Yeah.
I love the fact that
Same here.
Exactly. All right, whatever.
So Steve, I have a question. You
Shoot,
lit it
yeah.
up. You know, you're about a third of the way into it.
I am.
Tell me, what flavors do you get out of it? What is your palate deriving from this H. Upmann 175th anniversary?
You know, and I don't know if it's just because of what I eat, throughout the day, the different cigars I'm smoking. But this one, I've been saying it a lot lately, so it might just be the mood I'm in or where I'm at with because I think a lot of times with palate for you, it's body chemistry also. So for me, I am getting like a warm spice in the middle of my tongue, the middle of the palate. I get like a warm spice. And I have had a couple sips out of the EH Taylor, which I typically get out of the straight rye. So I get a little bit of that kind of food flavors. I'm not getting as much like that chocolate. I don't know if you guys are still getting that once you're smoking it. Nate's saying no. I do get a little of that black pepper in the retrohale.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call this a spicy cigar, but again, when I say warm spice, it's different because a lot of people would say the same thing to me about like the earthiness. Like, what's a warm spice? And I think it's more of like a food spice. It's not like a pepper spice. It's not something that I think of as spicy. It's just kind of got this kind of like a mellow, overwhelming in a good way. But like that's the pronounced note I'm getting from it is kind of on the sides of my tongue and the middle of the tongue, which I think is, I don't know if I haven't looked at a diagram of it, of like the food palette or whatever, the taste.
Yep.
But that's where I'm getting a lot of it. I'm not getting much sweetness until the very, very end after I kind of swallow after smoking it without drinking anything. So I am getting a little bit of that kind of sweet at the end, but I think that kind of comes from like that warm food spice. What about you, Dustin?
I'm kind of with you, Steve. You know, I get some spice, a little bit of pepperness. It's not a lot, but I think that's where pairing it with the rye here, really you get that black pepper like you talked about, Josh. I get it more of like that medium plus to full body cigar. I'm not sure where it rates compared to the rest as far as your portfolio, where you guys would rate it to be at.
Yeah.
But I get that. But it's very smooth. It's not harsh by any means. It's just absolutely delicious. I get a little bit of creaminess from it. So that's where I think it kind of mellows that pepper.
Yeah.
That spice. It does sit kind of in the middle, back part of my tongue is where it sits. A little bit on the outside, but a little bit more on the back of mine.
And after taking another sip of the EH Taylor, I definitely am getting more of that spice. So maybe that's where it's coming from for me. Are you getting any of that, Josh?
Yeah. I get that I would call it like the pepper notes are on the retrohale. That's where you really get those peppery notes. And we were talking about this a week ago about what the difference is in between a pepperiness or a spiciness, right?
Yeah.
You'll have a lot of people say, hey, this is a spicy cigar. Well, you know, I mean, what does that mean? Well, I always classify pepperiness in two ways. A black pepper, right, that kind of clogs up the back of your throat, I would say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then a white pepper, which is a lot more subtle, right? It adds, I mean, both add to foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you talk about spice and how you say warm spice, I really like that, and I've been using that term for about a month.
Have you really?
Because I get it. I get a lot of warm spice out of our new H. Upmann Espanol.
Yeah.
Which we might be smoking a little bit later.
We've got it. That might be we'll do that second cigar.
And what I classify as like that warm spice is like a cinnamon or a nutmeg.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it really exemplifies, like you said, on the sides or the back of your tongue.
Right.
You know, and so when you know, complemented with this EH Taylor, I get some sweetness on the back of the tongue after I've taken a sip and I smoked this cigar. I would even say, you know, along with that earthiness, that there's almost a meaty.
Okay.
You get kind of like a
peppered steak.
A peppered steak, yeah, you can say that, and you know, I like to I wouldn't say a peppered steak because you get the pepper on the retrohale, but then when I'm just smoking this thing and I don't retrohale, I get that meatiness. It's almost like I would classify chewiness.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you're getting into like
I can
whiskey
get that.
terms too. I think.
And I hate to get caught up in all of that, but
No, I think it's good.
people love, hey, what does this cigar do to you?
So I think, kind of going along the lines of what you're talking about, Josh, the more I drew on the cigar, I got, it's a Churchill, so it's, the ring gauge is about 50, but smoking it, for some reason, I get the sensation that I'm smoking a cigar that's around that 54 to 56 ring gauge. Like, just with the
Explain
amount.
that.
So I guess with the complexity of flavors that come in the cigar and the body of it and that, like you said, that meatiness to it, it feels like there's a lot more to that cigar than what the Churchill size entails. Because a lot of people will think, you've got a Lancero or a Robusto, they'll remove some of the leaves to get down to that size. Not so much to tamper the flavor as much, but sometimes you can get different notes from a larger cigar than you will the smaller brethren. And I think with this one, I get more flavors. It's kind of hard for me to pinpoint any particular ones, but when you mentioned that meatiness, that's where I got it. It's just like when I draw from it, it expands.
See, I think the opposite typically, and I'm not this. I mean, I am like on my side, and I think when you have a smaller ring gauge, I get more flavor a lot of times. I do. Now, I will say, on some cigars, I think with the wider ring gauge, you're going to get more smoke. So sometimes that'll, just because of the surface area, whatever, but I think you get a little bit more smoke from that. But I would say that a lot of times, especially with this, and everyone's got, I think, different opinions on that, but when you have a smaller ring gauge, I think you get a little more flavor from the wrapper. Just the ratios is going to be different. So with that being such a strong wrapper leaf, I think that's where this one definitely comes through maybe, and that's something that you're getting, Dustin, is that a lot of times the strength is definitely coming from the filler, from because that's what you do. You if you want to make it a little strong, you want to amp it up. You either add different types of tobacco. If you want certain flavors, you go up the primings, which would be closer to like the Ligero. So a lot of times you're going to get more punch from that. And with this one, with it the wrapper being, I'd be interested to see if this wrapper leaf technique is going to be utilized more. Maybe not 3 years, maybe not that, maybe not medio tiempo, but more like actually like messing with Ligero as the wrapper leaf if they can get their hands on it. And through fermentation, you don't have as much of that bitter little lack of flavor. You know what I mean? You're actually getting something where it's not necessarily the powerhouse because you're using a Ligero, because Ligero is not used. And for those that aren't familiar, again, you have the medio tiempo up top, right below that's the Ligero. And again, that's used in filler most of the time, sometimes binder, but it's not as combustible, so it's not used as a binder leaf all that often. So that's where you're using it in the filler, and that's where you're going to get a lot of the strength as far as the nicotine in the cigar. So the fact that this is being used as a wrapper leaf, this might be something that, whether it's AJ or if some of your other factories that you use, Josh, or anyone else out there, they might start messing around with this and saying, you know what, in the past it was like, I'm just going to use it. Like, there's been all Ligero cigars, and typically I'm going to say, and no offense to anyone out there, hopefully you guys aren't offended by any of the things we say, but it's like, it's kind of bullshit. That's a novelty thing. You're just like, yeah, man, this is all Ligero. I bet you can't smoke it. That was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, people were doing that.
Really, it was 5-6 years ago is when that kind of came on the scene, and it was all Ligero, and hey, I want the strongest cigar that I can get out there, and just pack it in there and
basically fuck flavor, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care what it tastes like. It's just going to be like, you know what? Like, it's all Ligero. Let's sit down and smoke this. And then someone smokes, you're like, oh, I'm not. It's fine. Yeah. And then you got the next guy smoking, and he's sweating halfway through it. And you're like, dude, you want to talk about meatiness? You got the meat sweats halfway through that cigar, bro. But, I think that's something that this is interesting because it is, I think, a lot of nuances. It's a very complex cigar, so I like that.
Do you think, now, this is for both you, Steve, and Josh, do you think this fermentation process changes the flavor of the medio tempo leaf itself?
Absolutely.
And do you think that doing the same process with a Ligero, like you said, Steve, will change that flavor of the leaf to where it could be utilized more broadly in like wrappers or binders or things of that sort.
Well, that's why I think that, I mean, that technique, I mean, everything you say about it when Josh is talking, Josh, you say, they were, it's medio tempo, extremely rare.
Yeah.
3 years, long time.
Higher than the Lajero.
Wasting broadleaf, which is not always commonly available. I mean, because the growing season in Connecticut is so different than anywhere else.
Short, yeah.
And so if they have a bad season, I mean, you're basically screwing the next, like, several years down the road, if you will. Like, there's a gap there. And so that's why I don't know. I mean, as far as the overall technique, this is a ballsy technique, I think, with this. By doing the amount of time, and then when I didn't even know the part about the broadleaf, basically being, I thought maybe, like, we'll see a cigar. When I first read about the cigar and heard about it, I thought that maybe we would see something where the broadleaf that he was doing this with would then be used on something else. Like, hey, the EH Upmann 175th, now we're using the broadleaf that was in with that medio tempo. It was a Habano, right?
Yeah.
So we're now utilizing this broadleaf in a cigar, and now that's the next thing out. But when you say that a lot of it is basically just wasted because it's all part of the fermentation process, that's expensive. So I don't see it happening all that often with the technique.
I wonder if some of the flavors from the broadleaf, though, transition themselves into that medio tempo or the Lajero.
You got to think here, because what's happening during the fermentation process. The leaf is being cooked, right?
Yeah.
Right, you're putting them in these pilons, right? If I said that correctly,
it sounded right.
Right?
Yeah.
Pilon, yeah.
We'll go with it.
Pilones, and so these big bales, right? And so what you're doing is you're wetting down the tobacco. So the tobacco has already been through the curing process. It's hung in the barn, right? And then it goes and it's wetted down. And you're putting it into these piles. So the medio tiempo, I believe is how it's
That's
pronounced,
how you say it, yeah.
Right? Is not being wet down. So the two leaves that it's being sandwiched with, which I said is the broadleaf, are being wetted down, and then it's being sandwiched in between these. And this process goes, and they're rotating this crop, right? They're rotating this I said crop, the fermentation bale constantly, because this is heating up to 180 degrees.
Yeah, so we've talked about it before. Let me kind of interject there, because when people hear cooked, they're thinking like it's being, there's a fire to it, right? But, I mean, this whole process, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I mean, that is exactly that's the cooking process, is by the physics of it, by putting all these tobacco leaves, putting water to it and everything else. Then they have, I don't know if you're as familiar with this either, Dustin, is that they have these, you can kind of imagine a extremely large meat thermometer.
Yeah.
And they stick it in different points of that pilon. And the traditional one, we've talked about it before on the podcast, is that it's in a circular shape. But a lot of the times, because there's so much, it's a lot more effective now, from my understanding, that they're not in like a circle with a gap in the middle, but they're in these long piles, like almost like rectangular piles. So, but it's like you go in there and you check it and all this stuff, and the ammonia is extremely high in the room. I mean, it's something you can barely walk in that room without gagging. That's the cooking process. So continue. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that.
As a compost pile, right?
Okay.
I mean, back in elementary school, we learned about compost, and we made a compost pile where you're throwing all the grass clippings and the eggshells and everything, right? And you come out in the morning and it's smoking, right? Because it's a cool morning here in the Midwest. Same thing. That's what's happening, right? It's breaking down of these sugars. And so that's what they're doing with these, and these broadleafs, right, are these big, thick leaves, right? And so over 3 years, the sugars are being fermented out of them, and all of that flavor is being absorbed, right? And there's nothing left to these broadleaf
so
leaves.
They're losing out in a sense,
and they're losing out. I mean, that's what makes this cigar so special, is that they're throwing away tobacco. I mean, that's it's an experiment that AJ did, and again, hats off to him. I mean, that's something special, and all the more reason why this H. Upmann 175th is so special.
Well, that's a good transition, I think. Nate, go ahead. Sorry.
So what's the retail on this cigar?
So suggested retail is what, $17.95, $18.95?
$18, yeah.
$18. So
Yep,
with
MSRP.
tobacco tax, I mean, you're going to be on our shelves. It's $19.95.
Yeah.
in Ohio. I think that's what you're finding it at, is right around that 19, 20, 21. Now, other shops, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if this is a protected price or not, but I mean, typically you'll see some of these limited editions. If you find it in your local shop, it might be a little more, just because it is limited. And when there's something limited out there that's this good, some retailers will raise the price, hopefully not too much, but by a couple bucks, just to try to appease all the customers and make sure that they'll limit. Can't come in, buy a box. You can only buy 2. You can buy 3. You have a limit per day. That's pretty common in this. And that's where I was going to transition, if you don't have anything else, Nate, is that's where we're getting into the whiskeys, is because I think this is something that's definitely a good segue into that, is the aging process. It's the same thing with the oak barrels, and utilizing. I mean, when you use that, it's the barrels are done after that, as far as the American distilleries are concerned. I mean, you're done. So it's like you let something sit in there for that long, and you hope that it's going to taste good. And it's just like what AJ's doing with this technique, is that it gets to a point where he could have been all the way through this and then, started smoking some of this and just been like, well, shit, that didn't work. And now you're out the broadleaf, and then you're like, well, what do I do with this? Now it's going to be filler leaf.
You're exactly right.
I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. So, I mean, there is a gamble with some of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely is.
I think that's why I asked the question about the timeline with the 3 years on where that was in the rest of the industry. And you made the comment, anywhere from 6 months to years. Because whiskey is a lot like that. The minimum for bourbon is 2 years. The minimum for bottled in bond, which is what we have tonight, is 4 years. Mm-hmm. And everything by EH Taylor is bottled in bond. So everything that you buy that is EH Taylor will always be 100 proof, aged for 4 years minimum. Whether it's a small batch or a single barrel proof, it doesn't matter. The straight rye, that's all a minimum of 4 years, and that's per the regulations that Colonel E.H. Taylor actually helped pass.
Yeah, he was a part of
back
that.
in
That's the history
1897.
There. Yeah, exactly.
So to kind of dive into that a little bit, the E.H. Taylor Straight Rye is one of 11 to 12 renditions that E.H. Taylor does. It's a unique mash bill for a rye that Buffalo Trace has. A couple of the other ryes that people are known for is Sazerac rye. So they have their regular Sazerac rye. There's a Sazerac, I believe it's 18, which is part of the Buffalo Trace Antique Series. A little bit different mash bill than what E.H. Taylor brings to the table. It is only rye and malted barley. Now, what the percentages are, I don't know, because Buffalo Trace does not let out any of their direct recipes.
Yep.
Which is fine. But tasting this, I get the high rye, as you would figure. But I'm leaning more
So
towards
good.
that 80% or so range for rye content in this.
Okay.
I get a lot of vanilla creaminess from it, as well as that cinnamon, nutmeg spiciness from that we typically come to find and love in the ryes.
Christmas Day.
Yep, Christmas Day. I don't know that I get as much of that in this as I do the Willets that we thoroughly love.
There's not as much of a spice. Again, going back to that, I don't think.
No, there's not. Let's see here.
You're bringing up the notes you brought to the table. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I got a lot of vanilla cream, a little bit of honey, and into a little bit of honey sweetness I got out of it. You get a little bit of that slight spice, the cinnamon, the nutmeg, all together. And I have a bottle of the regular Sazerac rye at home, and I've tried it. It is a lot different than the E.H. Taylor rye. And personally, I prefer the E.H. Taylor rye over Sazerac. It's around the $75, $80 mark for a bottle.
Here in Ohio, right?
If you can find it in Ohio. It is a lot more limited to find. Typically, they do 1 to 2 releases of it a year. Again, like I said, if you can find it.
Yeah, thank you again, Josh, for bringing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
For sure.
We expect a bottle every time you come to Columbus.
Amen.
So figure that out.
But like I said, it is also one of my favorites up there with Willet. I think Willet, for me, takes the cake, personally. Another great rye is the Michter single barrel rye for $36, which you can find here in Ohio.
I think there's a lot of good ryes out there, but it's something, I don't know. I mean, like Nate, he's been, I'd say, regularly bringing ryes around the garage, the shop. Like he's got some of the lower priced ones that we really like.
Ezra Brooks Rye.
Ezra Brooks Rye.
Which is great.
There are a lot of good ones. This is one, though, I would say, like, if I see this and I don't have, $70 cash on me, I'm still going to end up buying this bottle, just, like, almost out of principle, because I do like it that much. Mm-hmm. And it's not ungodly expensive, like, hundreds of dollars. But, I mean, I will say that there's something – a spider on me. Something quite different. Okay.
I think it's gone.
Maybe. He's probably down my shirt. Anyways, I will say this tight shirt. Yeah, I know. I will say though, I try to seek this one out, and it's hard to seek out because it's just like you said, it's unavailable.
It is. It's up there on the shelf with the Masterson's Rye, which we've had thanks to Nate. The Masterson's is around 10 years. A lot lighter than what this one is. Personally, I think for that price point, I would take the EH Taylor Rye hands down every time. And
if anyone out there, I mean, I know Doug Ruffalo's out there. Good evening, love the EH Taylor Rye. I mean, I don't know of many people that don't like this one. Now, I don't know if they like it as much as we do, but I will say this is one of the ones that I will say, if you see it, definitely grab a bottle.
Absolutely.
Because just having your collection, I mean, but it's something that I like this one. Like we keep bringing up the Willet. That's where we're at. I know Dustin shares that. I don't know about Josh if he's had the Willet 3-year much.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is one that I try to bring out around like December, because it is something that's not going to be super overpowering, but it's got that warm, and we always say it on here is that like I always described it as like Christmas Day. I mean, this is like you got a little bit of that, like you were saying, some of those flavors like nutmeg and
cinnamon,
the cinnamon,
clove.
the honey. I always say like ginger snap a little bit. You know what I mean? It's kind of got that aroma, that flavor, and it's delicious.
I think comparable to the Willet. I think I get more of those cinnamon, nutmeg, spicy notes versus the EH Taylor Rye. But I'm with you on that, Steve. If I see it on the shelf, and I'm buying it.
Josh, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, it exemplifies the flavors of this H. Upmann. Yeah, I mean, it really does.
This is a great pairing.
I mean, those vanilla notes that you were talking about, Dustin. I mean, I think it gives a subtlety to this cigar, and that spice that you get from it, and that that meatiness that I was talking about before, and you said it was like a peppered steak. I think more so than a peppered steak, it's kind of like a smoked meat almost, right?
I can see that.
Like after you take a drink of it and you smoke on this H. Upmann, it fills your mouth and you get like this smoked meat flavor.
Yeah.
And that's what
like
I was getting from that. Yeah, you get that sweetness on the back of the tongue, and then on the sides of that tongue is really what comes through in that
it really
smoke.
coats your tongue.
Yeah.
After when you draw on the cigar after you take a sip of the whiskey, it really coats it in a great way too, and not like some cigars out there you'll take a draw from it and it just overpowers everything.
No.
Yeah.
This I
very well balanced.
Maybe I was just excited to drink this bottle for the last year. And I do like this cigar a lot. I got to say, this is probably definitely, much like Josh is the top 5 dressed individual in the industry, I'd say this is in my easily top 5 of all the episodes we've done as far as a pairing.
That's cool.
I really think that. I don't know
I
about
feel like this
around
is
the
Christmas
garage.
Day for Steve.
Yeah.
All around.
It was all by design.
He's got a 175th anniversary cigar.
It was by design.
Thousands
right?
of my closest friends in my garage.
Over a year ago, I thought about this, and I had this, downstairs. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bring this. We were on the. I made my way onto the
ended
episode.
up on the podcast.
A little more than a year ago, and I brought this, and so it's really cool to have this cigar and share this special moment with you guys. So
appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
it's real touching.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone out there.
Christmas in September.
Put that in the description on the podcast. Do not open till Xmas.
There you go.
Do not open.
I love it.
No, this is good, man.
Reminisce for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Steve.
Go ahead.
The first time you were in the garage for that episode just over a year ago, What was that like for you and Paul? Just sitting in the audience, and then halfway through, you ended up pulling a chair. What was that like for you, and what was kind of going through your mind, and then how was that episode?
I mean, it was such a neat experience. It was. I was just getting started here at Altadis, and Paul and I were doing some training here in Columbus, and I mean, how long had you been doing the podcast? Do you remember, Steve?
At that point, I want to say it was less than 6 months.
Less
right
than 6
around
months.
that.
Yeah,
about
yeah.
6 months.
I want to say it was pretty new. It was at the old garage, right?
It was at the old
we
garage.
hadn't hit the 25th episode yet, I don't think.
That I don't remember. Nate, do you know which episode they were on? I'm not sure either, but I mean, it was definitely towards. It was past the infancy stage where we were like really figuring out what we wanted to do as far as the overall concept of it. But as far as like what we get a lot of traction now on like Facebook, we had tried Instagram Live. I don't even know if we were doing Facebook that time or not. I don't know if we were at that point or not.
I think you
We
were.
might have
I
been.
think you just started.
But yeah, it was definitely towards the beginning stages of where we were at. And I remember that episode for me, just to kind of throw that out there, was that it was the topic of family. Mm-hmm. And that's where, like we were talking, I think, before the podcast, that was when Josh was kind of sitting back. And like you said, it was the beginning of your life here with Altadis, because that's just been a year and a half?
Year and a half,
About
yeah.
a year and a half.
Yep.
And Paul was like, well, we're not really sure. And Paul had been an early adopter of the podcast, an early supporter of it. But he's like, you don't know our whole portfolio and all that stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking like, Paul, have you been listening to the podcast? It's like we talk about the cigar, we talk about the whiskey, and then it's like it gets into the life topic. And then so you sat back, and at the end of it, I don't know if you had a conversation with Paul or not, like briefly, but you're like, I'm going to get on there.
No.
Or you just got up and walked
Paul
over.
is so great, man. He gave me autonomy. He said, if you want to be on, that that's fine. I tried to get him on. Oh man, Paul is awesome.
We do need to get him on.
Oh, I would
trick
love
him
it,
or
Paul.
something.
Come on, please. But no, I mean, you guys just got into the topic, and I mean, what got me into cigars was my passion,
Yeah.
right? For cigars. Another topic that I'm passionate about is family, and so
sure.
we were talking about family, and I felt compelled, and I asked, hey guys, you mind if I jump on? And you guys gave me a seat, and so it was really special. It was it was very neat episode to be a part of, and I cherish it. So
That's awesome, man. It was a great episode. It
was phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yep.
All right, so Nate's going to say that real quick, and we're going to roll into the topic here. So for those of you on Facebook, again, thank you guys if you guys tuned in from the beginning for bearing with the technical difficulties. We're hoping that that doesn't happen anymore, and that's why we're saving it. But again, Josh, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, man.
Much appreciated.
Thank you, guys. This is a good point before we get into it. Anyone watching right now, if you guys are enjoying it, we're about to get into the topic about trends versus tried and true. If you guys want to share on your Facebook feeds, that helps us out. Any pages you think or any people you think that would enjoy this is the time to do it, is to share it as we get into this part of it, which we do. As Jake said last week, this is something that we feel sets us apart from all the other bourbon and cigar podcasts, and those guys are all great. Guys and girls that are doing it. There's new ones popping up all the time, and I'm trying to stay up with a lot of them. But I love everyone's got their different takes on it, but this is definitely ours. Nate?
Yeah.
As a bonus for the Facebook and for the YouTube listeners and watchers, when you were talking about the flavors with a cigar, and when people ask you, what does this cigar taste like, what is the strangest flavor you've ever had someone tell you? Because I know exactly what the weirdest thing I've ever heard was, but what's the weirdest thing that you've heard in your time in this industry? And Steve, that goes for you too.
Man, I you know what I think? I think that I heard a soapiness.
Soapiness.
A soapiness.
Was that
I
a
have
pro
heard
or
that
a con?
as well.
Is that a pro or a con?
I'm taking it as a con.
Yeah.
When you tell me you're deriving a soapy flavor out of your cigar, I don't know. You were washing dishes and your cigar fell into the sink.
Like, were we talking Dawn, Palmolive,
Yeah.
Irish Spring?
Doug Ruffalo says
man.
bicycle tire. I'm thinking like no tears shampoo. If I'm thinking soapiness, you know what I mean? Because as a child, as an infant, you know what I mean? You know, it's just everywhere.
Everybody knows
it's
that Johnson and Johnson, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you have a couple kids right now.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
You know, 8 or 9.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, not 8 or 9.
You have 2
kids. 7
kids.
7 and 3. I do not have 7 kids.
I know. But I mean, like you know that, right? You get the no tears, and you're trying like they're in the bathtub.
I don't
and
know.
you're, like, rubbing their
all
head.
natural with me, bro.
Oh, yeah?
We don't do Johnson and Johnson.
But you know what I mean? Like that's everywhere.
I do.
That's
I'm just
everywhere.
kidding.
You know what I mean? And that's why it's no tears. 'Cause it's in their eyes, it's in their mouth, and all that stuff. I think that's an infant type thing.
Yeah.
Where it's coming back. They're like, you know what this tastes like?
Yeah.
My childhood.
That's
Soapiness.
interesting.
Or maybe they eat soap or
Soapiness.
paste or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
They had a dirty
that's
mouth.
another thing. They got the bar soap in the mouth as a child.
Yeah.
Brings
Again,
back
that
a
would be
lot
a
of
con, I
memories.
think.
Yeah, I think it would.
Doug Ruffalo says bicycle tire
Bicycle tire.
was the weirdest.
The weirdest one I've ever had was cucumber and mayonnaise.
Like as a combined flavor or like 2 different flavors?
Like the
Or
same.
you're dipping a cucumber in mayonnaise.
No,
and
it
then
was the
taking a
same
bite,
cigar. And it was the owner of a shop.
Right.
Goes, yeah, I get notes of cucumber and mayonnaise.
I feel like he had a sandwich earlier before he smoked it.
Ironically, he did not.
Huh.
Wow.
I'm going to go with the classic one. I'm going to tell you. Avi says maybe confused with floral flavors and couldn't pick it up. Maybe. That's very kind of you, Avi. But I would say I still, like, we went back to the dirt thing. Barnyard. I don't.
Really?
It's
You know,
not.
I grew up on a farm. I've not once had a cigar that
it's being
reminded me
described
of
as that on a lot
a
of them.
barnyard.
But
I feel like if I had one that reminded me of a barnyard, I don't know that I would continue to smoke it personally.
I think, like, you'd be like hay or, you know.
I think that's so
Straw.
frequent, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a barnyard, and you know, I get that more off of the foot. You know, when I'm smelling the cigar, or maybe the dry
Well, I mean, they
inhale.
They're like, you know, you hang them in a barn.
I could see like maybe like the hay mounds, like you said, the hay and the straw and
I
stuff.
just think
and the dryness,
barnyard. I
but
think of like a zoo exhibit. You know what I mean?
I think of
there's,
like manure.
like manure and shit
absolutely.
everywhere.
I
Like
don't
you
know
walk
that I
in.
would get that.
I don't,
Maybe
I've
the
had it.
ammonia
it's
from
just
it? I
used
don't
though
know.
as like a
But
like
I-
in the description or in a review as like, you know, oh, at this point I get barnyard. And I'm
It,
like, and you kept
it's very
smoking?
frequent.
Vague.
Yeah.
Well,
that-
I
mean,
usually
that's
get that when it's a cigar that you can tell hasn't been aged very long. You get the kind of I had one where it tasted like what a horse stable smells like.
Sounds terrible.
Just a really heavy ammonia.
No.
And I got like
Heavy ammonia and wood shavings.
I got a 1/4 inch into the cigar and threw it away and lit up something else.
Were you in a barn at the moment?
No, I was
Okay.
sitting on the front porch of my apartment.
Are you near a farm?
No.
Did horses
in
go
the
by
city.
previously?
No.
All right,
Okay.
these are all fair questions, but
Okay.
all right,
Process
let's
of
get
elimination.
started here. That's a good question. So one of the things that it was interesting with the EH Taylor Straight Rye, Dustin, you brought up a little bit of research on that, and they said what with the tried and true. If you
So this
recall.
actually won silver in 2018, the Tried and True Award. EH Taylor did. The Straight Rye. Ironically enough, it won gold in the 2019 San Francisco World Spirits competition. Guess what? Got silver. Sazerac Rye.
there,
Also by Buffalo Trace.
I believe those judges were biased. They all
Probably
worked for
so.
Buffalo Trace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to kind of frame this, you guys out there hopefully know Dustin a bit. You know me a bit as far as my background. Josh, I'm going to try to summarize this. I pulled you up on online. I don't know if you know you have a pretty
My
big fan, huh?
Ooh.
My wiki page.
Yeah, your wiki page. But you
Would you
correct
look
me
at that?
I'm gonna summarize this, and you can kind of to branch off of this. But I wanted to do this from your business background here. You went to Miami University. I know that because I also went to Miami University, and we shared that. You went long after I did. But I noticed, and again, this might just be what you had out there, but you've been a year and a half with Altadis, and that is not your first cigar industry job, but you had taken a bit of a hiatus at one point.
Yep.
And you're in the wellness industry.
Yep.
As a partner in a business for about a year or so.
Yeah.
And before that, and now you're currently still doing a kind of a side project business as well with the beach shirt. Is that still going on?
Yes, technically, yes. Yeah, it is.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
Sales are. It's not your major focus right now, but you even have doing your own thing in like kind of the retail or like the customer product line. And before all of that, though, you spent 5 years where you really kind of got into this industry with Oliva cigars. Yeah. Correct?
Yep.
And I found that really interesting, and I'm going to kind of pump you up. But, I mean, just to kind of give you guys a frame of who this person is. But in the industry, you had taken a kind of a dormant territory and just blew it up in about 4.5 years, right?
Yeah.
You had huge growth. And, I mean, you're talking double-digit growth over, year over year, 4 years. And then you also, in the overall span, you were there for, 4.5, 5 years, close to.
Yeah, just under 5 years.
I mean, a staggering number, 58% growth in that territory. So, I mean, as far as knowing customers and going with this, because I think that's a part of this topic is the trends versus tried and true is business, relationships, things like that, because it's not just trends when people think of it like what's trendy and things like that. You have experience going into an industry that's been around for a long time, and it's all about your techniques of working with people. And before that, you had a small, I say small, couple years in logistics.
Yeah.
Doing sales, or what was that?
Yeah. It was I was a logistics broker. Mm-hmm. So right after Miami, I jumped in and was a logistics broker for a year and a half, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Super successful in that.
Yeah.
But where my passion lied was elsewhere, and that was with cigars.
And I want to say the one that really surprised me was another almost 6 years. Where'd you work for almost 6 years? I mean, because when I saw it, I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense just because of your personality, probably growing up and who you were, as a person. Like it was a natural fit. But then just imagining kind of the culture of this place, and then also the way that you are with people, and how, I think it's genuine as far. I mean, I've known you for 6 years, 7 years almost now.
Yep.
And just your overall demeanor and everything else, I was not surprised to see this. But I imagine you had incredible training outside of college, after college. But you were with who for almost 6 years?
Was that Starbucks?
You were at Starbucks.
I was at Starbucks company. Yeah.
I like it.
Yep.
Was that Starbucks?
Yeah.
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 So you were at Starbucks for almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And what did you do at Starbucks?
I was I started out as a barista and then made my way up into management and helped manage a store through college. It was quite a company to work for. So I definitely appreciated everything I picked up at the Starbucks coffee company.
I think that's one of those jobs and one of the stops in your career that it probably never goes away. Like, I mean, I can just like, with me, with like the moving stories and working with moving customers, even in management. I mean, like working with different customers, that many customers. I mean, just all sorts of stories that you remember. Probably a lot of the negative stories.
You know what? I mean,
they're hard to forget.
It was a true mix. It really was. And, that's where I got the majority of my management experience from. And so I really appreciate, my time because I was really naive, I guess you could say, when I started. I was 18, 19.
18. So you were in college working at Starbucks.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it truly was. I mean, the training that you went through, but then, the customer base, exactly what you said, and the customer relation, at that point. I mean, you get to know when you work at the same store for, 6 years, you get to know your customers.
Regulars,
right? I would come in, I would open up the store, and then, leave, go to class, and then oftentimes come back and close up the store. So
that's a heavy workload.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was my life at that point, and where it had led me. That's what I had to do to survive. But I picked up a lot of my style, you could say. Not fashion style, but personable.
Heavy uniform policy there.
Oh man, I bucked that trend a lot of times. Let me tell you, I
push
did.
the envelope. Did you?
I did. That wasn't the first time, but that's where I got it from.
I love it.
Yep, absolutely. That green apron, baby.
Yeah, you still have it?
I do.
Do you?
I do. Yep.
Wow.
Still got one. Yep.
Still reminisce, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Our great friend AJ said, "Let me get you some great coffee."
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
Jenny's Java. You've had
Hey,
that.
I was part of that crew. Listen, I mean, I go everywhere but Starbucks. Now.
You won't go to Starbucks?
No. That's
Oh,
not
I was
true.
gonna say.
That's not true. I mean, their nitro is pretty great.
Right?
Yep. I love that.
I'm
that
addicted
nitro.
to that right now.
No, I mean
AJ,
what
if you're
they've done.
listening, get some nitro going.
Yeah, but no, I mean
some.
at that time, what I was really working towards was going over to Asia on their expansion and development team.
That was the goal?
That was the goal. Yeah,
Wow.
yep. And so I worked my way up, and that was the plan after college. I graduated college, and that's what I was really aiming for, and that unfortunately at that point in time didn't come to fruition, and so that's where I made my exit.
So they kind of closed the door on that?
Yeah, they wanted more experience, and I wasn't okay with that. If 6 years wasn't enough experience, and then the education that I got from Miami, it just really set me off, and unfortunately it was what it was at that time. But it led to bigger and better things.
What do you guys think of, and Dustin, I mean, get in on this too, but I mean, and Nate, you're welcome too, guys listening, guys and girls out there, when you think of trends, like the topic being trends versus tried and true, I mean, you can relate it to cigars, whiskey, you can, anything you want, but like when you think of trends, how do you guys define that? How do you guys think of trends when someone says that?
So I think with trends, I think it's things that tend to come and go.
Okay.
But I also feel like those things that are tried and true, they all started as trends.
Right.
So what trends are out there that now have become tried and true? I mean, people can talk about Apple and the iPhones being, a trend that's just continued, but then there'll also be people who argue, well, no, that's just the tried and true. But then you've got different sides of the coin when that comes.
And see, I would look at like the iPhone as something where they kind of buck the trend. So I think and this is kind of up for discussion, really honest, is that trend versus fad. When you think of something that's trendy, I mean, I think you're describing something where I think of what you're describing more as a fad. It's going to come and go. It's all encompassing. You know what I mean? Like when you think we brought up fashion kind of in a matter of speaking. It's like all the years go by and there's a fad. It's not necessarily. I mean, fashion's an easy one. I think where trends, people think fads, like it's trendy, but we're tried and true. Like Josh comes in and one of those things. He's got kind of that mixture of maybe a trend. I wouldn't call it a fad, but you also have the staples of the tried and true with fashion. I think that's a great example of it where you got the suit jacket on, sometimes you got the tie on, you know what I mean? You got even lapel pins on, stuff like that. That's not necessarily a trendy thing. But I mean, that differentiate, I would say that a fad versus a trend is, I think a trend is more of something that is around you, but it's not necessarily an all-encompassing thing. It's like in business, it's something where you see something changing. So like with the other phones, like you're talking about, there is like the iPhone. They went out there. I still remember that in 2007. Steve Jobs is up there on stage, and his big thing. Yeah, you had the Palm Pilots and things like that. But I mean, as far as something that you're using your finger to instead of buttons. And I still remember having those conversations, like with my brother, for example, who's pretty much, I mean, he's not as anti-Apple now, but at the time he was definitely anti-Apple. And he's like, well, I don't want a full touchscreen like that. I need keys. I need to be able to type now with my thumbs, even though like a year or two prior it was all T9 text with 1 through 9 or 0 through 9 and all that stuff. And it's like then all of a sudden it's like the iPhone blew up, and then the trend was not a fad. Turned out, maybe that's what you're saying, Dustin, is that it was like something that everyone jumps on a little bit, but it might go away. But then everyone, like now, you can't find a phone, you can't find a tablet, anymore. It's all touchscreen. Yeah. So like you have to jump on that trend.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's very true. I also think, when you think business, I work at Kroger, and a lot of things, we have trends or things that we call trends because they'll make changes in processes, and once you actually fully learn the process, you come to find out, well, this was basically the same thing we were doing about 5 years ago.
Right.
It just comes full circle again. They
Yeah.
changed it. It's got a different name, but at the end of the day, it's still the same damn process.
Same thing. What about you, Josh? What do you think of when you think of trends?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I think of, believe it or not, is fashion.
I believe that. Knowing you, I believe
I had
that.
no idea.
I do. You think of trends, and I mean, it's really an all-encompassing, and what I mean by that is it always comes for full circle, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of see that now. A lot of the vintage stuff, right, is coming back, and you always have that. You always have that in the fashion world, right? You can think of it as. I don't know what it was back in the late 80s into the early 90s. A lot of people were wearing the pins under their tie, right? And we're talking business, right? Was it before?
You're thinking down here. You're thinking up top of the collar.
I'm thinking up top. I'm thinking of the collar, right? So
that was in the
you think
20s
back,
even I think.
Okay, maybe it was, and then
more recent
and
years,
then it made its way back.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of Eddie Murphy was wearing one in Beverly Hills Cop, in one of the Beverly Hills Cops, and you saw that go away. Right in the late 90s into the 2000s, and I've seen some people bringing it back, right? And
the collar pins.
Do you have
any?
I don't yet. I was
thinking the tie pins, down here. You know what I mean? Like that's classic. That's classic.
Yeah.
That went away, then it came back. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the side clips.
And think of the ties, right?
Yeah.
You go back and look at some of those ties. Those were some pretty wide ties, right? And then everything went slim, right? And then now you're getting back into, and I think you're going to see, and it's these fashion trends that everybody is setting, right? These high profile fashionistas and everything, and you'll see it. Let me bring back the wide pant, right? I mean, how many people
wide pant are you
remember the Jenkos, right?
Oh,
I don't know.
They
you
were
don't remember the
basically like
jeans.
cement culverts. As far as
so you have to remember. So I'm never really fashionable. I'm
You're
a
never
t-shirt
really fashionable.
jeans
So
guy,
I mean, back in
these are brands.
elementary, going into middle school,
We're talking about hammer pants?
For me, no, because those were cuffed at the end.
Oh yeah, they were.
I'm
These
talking
were just
about
like straight giant tubes.
These were the pipeline or the lead pipes. I think
Those were terrible.
It was, right. They were awful. They were
then
awful.
you had the combo of the Carpenter pipe pants.
Yeah, the Carpenter, and then the Cargos came back, and the Cargos. I mean, those were always, I don't want to say in style because they weren't in style, right? But they had trended before back in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, and then you saw the resurgence of them, and then you knew you were a dad in the 2000s if you were wearing cargo shorts.
How many
no
pairs
offense to
of
anybody
cargo
who
shorts do you own, Josh? You're dad
right
so,
now?
Yeah, currently.
Zero.
Wow.
Yeah. I haven't gotten into the cargo.
Yeah, you're still young though. You know what I mean?
Well, and so now what is it? It was the the real tapered, the slim fit, right? And now you're seeing that
skinny jeans
go skinny jeans, right?
The shorter shorts.
And now you're seeing it go back. Right, and the fashion trend now is getting into a little bit more of a wider pant or a wider suit, right? I just hope that it doesn't come back the big baggy suits.
No, stay tailored.
Yeah.
Tailored is something that I see something that has come back into.
Well, so then you go into classic, right? And tried and true, right?
There you go.
That's that's what the classic is, and that's what we try and. I always try and stay true to what's classic.
I see. We see a lot of it with cars too. A lot of especially the American brands with the muscle cars, they're always trying to bring back a lot of that heritage from the original lines. Call it quote retro, as Jay mouthed back there. But
you saw it with the Mustang
and the
originally, the Challenger,
yep.
the Camaro,
yeah,
right. And then have you seen the 2020 Bronco?
Yes.
The Ford
It's amazing.
Bronco.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty
Yeah.
transparent, though. I think if you look at that, you line that up, and I haven't really like researched that, but because we were talking about it, is that you look at the generations, right? So all of those classic ones, like the Challenger, the Mustang, the Camaro, and all that stuff. Yeah, some of them stuck around, but like Dodge was the big one with like the Charger, the Challenger, and all that stuff. Who has the money to buy like an SRT 8 or a Hellcat typically right now? How old are they?
40s and 50s.
40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
These were they were kids. You know what I mean? These are the
Yeah.
people that like, oh yeah, my dad had this. Man, I wish he would have never sold this. Or I had this. It wasn't in great shape, but I had this car back when I was 20 years old. Now you fast forward 40 years later, and it's like, hey, you're close to retirement age. You have a bunch of money, hopefully, and now we're going to rename it and welcome back to your childhood. Buy this.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's pretty transparent, and they're all badass. Don't get me wrong, but I think that's pretty transparent of why these things happen, especially when you get to cars.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, let's transition. Let's talk about the cigar industry,
There you go.
right? I mean, what was the trend 4 or 5 years ago was the double Toro, and then he went to the 770, and
Got
then he got into the
bigger.
880s,
Yep, bigger.
right? And we all said, this is a trend. This is a trend. We're going to get through this, right? But what has stayed tried and true through it all,
Your classic sizes.
the number one seller, I believe, right now is still the Toro.
Toro.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's like your middle size, where I think it wasn't that long ago, too, though. It was like the Robusto.
Yeah.
Corona Robusto, the smaller smokes, something that is
Lanceros.
Lancero, that's classic Cuban size, absolutely.
Panatella, yeah.
Panatella,
Yeah.
very skinny, but I mean, yeah, you're right. For a while, you see that. But I think that is actually a trend, because if you were a cigar maker at the time and you didn't go to at least a 6x60, for those that don't know cigars all that well, I mean, it's a 6-inch cigar by 60 ring gauge, and that's the thickness of the cigar. If you just ignored it, you lost a big market share.
You did.
So I mean, that's you might think it's a fad. There are probably people out there, cigar makers. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, you see the sales dip because you're not following a market trend. I mean, Doug says in business, trends can become market transitions. Spotting them ahead of others can make you a lot of money. I mean, that's something that that's that gamble you were talking about with like Steve Jobs and Apple back then. It was like when they did that, that was a vision that they had. Much like I think Ernesto Perez Carrillo is one that I would say was one of the pioneers of making these like bigger, fatter cigars. Would you agree with that, Josh?
Bigger ring gauge. I don't know my history that well with that, but yeah, I would say that with that La Gloria Cubana, that was one of the first 660s that that I saw out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the company that I used to work for,
The Florida Dominicana, yeah.
Yeah, they were they were on the tail end of that
Right.
when they finally got into the 60s. Even that was hard for them, for Lido to make, was to get to that 60 ring gauge. But then that DL 700, which is a 6.5 by 60, that's been his number one seller ever since it came out, and that's been almost 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
And then he had by special. It started out as a special request, the Digger, which was just the DL 700 but 2 inches longer. So you were getting that longer smoke without increasing the ring gauge. But then during my time with that company, that's when he finally came out with the Grand Nu, which was a 64.
Yeah.
So that's a true 1 inch in diameter cigar.
Yeah.
And then since then, he's also come out with he calls it the 707, but it's a 7x70.
Yeah.
And it was that was kind of towards the tail end because he wasn't one of the first ones to do that. He kind of was like, okay, that's that, because he, like Josh had alluded to, that had been going on, but when it first came out, people were like, oh, this is a fad. This isn't going to last very
You
long.
held off, right? Or he held off at that point.
So there are a lot of companies like, no, this big ring gauge thing, that's a fad. We're going to hold off because we think it's going to go back to the traditional Robusto, Toro, Churchill, Corona sizes. But that trend kept going for so long that it's like, now it's a trend. They thought it was a fad. Now it's a trend, and if we want to get some of that market share, we've got to put out a product.
That's a business decision at that point, right?
Yeah, because you're trying to capitalize and catch some of that market share, even though it's not your core, it's not what defines you. you're trying to catch in on some of those buyers.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, like with trends and trying to steer clear, because not steer clear. I mean that was when Dustin you brought up about what I consider more fads, but I think that does sometimes start. I think when I think of the fads again, it's like it's all around you. Like, so we got to go all in. We are completely remodeling our business. We're completely fashion. You see people over the years, right? And it's like when you're a kid or even like in their 20s or 30s, it's kind of like you see them dress in a certain way, and then you see them 5 years later, and you don't even recognize them just because they don't dress like that. I think of like goth. Like the goth style or whatever, like when that was going around and all this stuff, and then you see someone that used to be like in high school, and I was in high school in the 90s, so it was like you see like these kids that were goth, and then you see them on Facebook, and they're like requesting you, and they're in like a sweater, and like you got that whole outfit at J. Crew, and you're with your kids that are in matching outfits. You're like, that was a fad. That was, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with goth or anything else like that. I mean, I still see people kind of dress like that, but clearly not as much. Clearly not as much, and maybe that's just the age thing. I don't think it's a big thing in high school at this point, but I mean that's like a fad. But to Nate's point, it was something. If you ignore it completely, you have to combine it. In my opinion, like with trends and tried and true, is like you have to combine it. You can't be oblivious. You can't necessarily stick to your guns and be like, I'm not gonna follow this trend that's out there, and I'm gonna ignore it. And it's like I feel like you have to be. At least have some sort of awareness out there, social awareness of what is the market. Or
it's the bourbon industry right now.
The bourbon industry is another good example.
I mean, there's so many distilleries. I mean, the popularity of it right now is through the roof. But I think, to your point, distilleries now are pumping so much more money into their production, to their facilities, to the atmosphere and the experiences that people who enjoy the spirits enjoy coming down to visit those distilleries. I mean, people are creating these, call it Disney World atmospheres down in Kentucky, and I think that's a great example to the point you were making, Steve.
Absolutely.
Right now, it's it's a trend, call it a fad, if you will, with it booming so much. But these companies are jumping on it like, no, this is going to be around for a little while, and they're pumping money into this because they know that the product that they're going to create, both that customers purchase to take in and the experiences they can create when these customers come down to visit the distilleries,
Absolutely.
is going to keep them pulled in for such a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you can't ignore, obviously, is that if it's booming and people are looking at ryes, and you're like, I'm not going to make a rye. If that was the one that hit. Or I'm going to do the bottle and bond type stuff later in the game, and with all the history coming out, I think there was a period of time where not that long ago that no one really, as vast as it is now, no one really cared about like the history of cigars or whiskey. It was just kind of a thing to do socially. It's like, oh yeah, I'm getting into bourbons. I'm hanging out with the boys, the girls, and we do a cigar night and all that stuff. But the more you dive into it, now all of a sudden a business needs to look at it and be like, hey, we need to really push our history. We need to push more of the overall picture.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it goes into that experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, Dustin, it's a lot about the experience, and I mean, that goes into the cigars as well. Mm-hmm. You take a look back and look at the creation of the nub, which was before my time. At Oliva, how many companies thought that the nub was going to be a fad, right? And
yeah, so nub is, I'm trying to like make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yes.
You're looking at like basically a shorter cigar, typically about 4 inches was what they were doing.
4x60, yeah.
4x60 was the classic size, and everything. They had like 4 different sizes, but it was like a 358, 460, 464 maybe, torpedo, and then a 466. And you're just like, all right. But it was all you're lighting up in the sweet spot was the way that Sam really pushed that with Oliva at that time.
Yeah. Yep. The core of the cigar, right? The sweet spot, and I think a lot of people thought that might be a fad, right? And then little by little, it turned into a trend.
Oh yeah.
Right, and then who did you see? Come on, that was the big sell when I was there. Was all of a sudden Davidoff came out with a 4x60 cigar.
That's kind of how you know you made it, I guess.
That's kind of how you know
one of the big boys.
Right?
the tried and true, if you will.
Yeah,
Comedy's you.
That's
and,
right.
And so now it's a part of the industry. Are the nub cigars and that particular brand, but then the 4x60 overall caught on. Right, and then you got in little by little to the 65, the 64, and then the 70. And I remember being at Oliva like, hey, we need a 7x70. We need a 7x70 because that's what was being asked for. That's what some customers wanted. But again, you leave it up to the higher ups at that time, right? Oh no, that's just a fad. That's just a trend.
Yeah.
And then what happens? You end up coming with a 7x70.
What was the 770? What brand was that?
Padilla Cava.
Oh yeah. And an 8x60.
Was a 7x70 that we had, and
60.
I think you've seen a lot of them get away from it, but you still have them. I mean, our line, the Juan Lopez, the number 4.
Mm-hmm.
You have a 7x70 size, and that size is still selling hand over foot. So you still have that customer segment, but as a trend as a whole, I think we've seen things balance, if you will, and they go back to the tried and true, right? Where I think the 660 is always going to be there, and the 7x70, you have those customers that are always going to be there, and you'll have the companies that still make that, but the tried and true, you go back to the classic sizes, the Robusto, the Toro, the Churchill size, the Corona.
Nate?
Well, we talked about it a little bit last week with the Quinta Ruban from Glenmorangie, and then even more so 3 weeks ago with Rob Wilson when we had the Basil Hayden Caribbean Reserve Rye. Years ago, there were very, very few whiskey makers that were finishing their whiskeys in rum, port casks, and not a whole lot of companies do it, but now you see it all over the place. And it's the same thing with cigars. There's a company that, had been aging part of their tobacco in bourbon barrels for years, just never advertised it. And then all of a sudden, a few companies start advertising, hey, this cigar is aged in whiskey barrels. This cigar is aged in rum barrels and Woodford barrels. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We've been doing that for years. Okay, we're going to put it on our packaging now. Because when we were doing it, no one cared. And now, all of a sudden, it's a trend.
Yeah, you want to go whiskeys, I'd say, when we met Eddie Russell from Wild Turkey, that was a big thing, for him is that, Jimmy Russell, who basically was really, it's not a bad thing, but, stuck in his ways, you know what I mean? 101, proof, it's got to be spice, it's got to be bold, it's got to be all this stuff. And then when he finally hands the reins over to his son, Eddie, who's been in the industry basically his entire life, and all of a sudden, he's like, hey, I want to do this. And Eddie basically tells you that, he's like, yeah, I asked my dad about it. He's like, well, you're probably going to screw up the whole thing, but, yeah, go ahead. You know what I mean? Because it was like,
it's yours now.
But they never went away from their tried and true. They never went away from their core products. They had these things on the outside, right? You know what I mean? But they stuck with what worked for them. They stuck with what they were known for. I think, with Altadis, it's a great example of it. You look at Buffalo Trace coming back into, the mix big time. I think more recently in the bourbon boom, they have some core products that they are not going away from. They'll throw out all the other fun ones, the aged ones, and all that stuff. But it's when it comes down to it, you look at breweries are the same way. I know I've talked about it on the podcast before. It's with all the craft brews and everything else, that got so trendy and it got so popular that if you I've said this story before, it's with me drinking a Miller Lite in a bar at a World of Beer or one of those craft brew places, people are literally looking down on you because you are drinking something that is outselling every other beer in that place combined. And it's I think this is doing okay. I think that this is a proven business model that they are not going to just ruin Miller Lite. I mean, you did that with Coca-Cola when they came out with the new Coke, and it was a huge flop because you took something that people loved, and you're like, you know what? We're going to go with where everything's going. We're going to revamp it. We're going to, redesign. We're going to reformulate, and you threw it out there and like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, no, we want Coca-Cola Classic, and that's when it came back as Coca-Cola Classic, if you remember that.
It's been a while, but I think I remember it coming back.
But
out
why
as
did they
Coca-Cola
come out
Classic.
with new Coke?
I don't even know. I mean, I assume they were trying to follow a trend with more sugary flavored sodas.
I think that was back when you had the kind of the start of the big pop wars between Coke and Pepsi and all that. It's like, okay, we're starting to lose market share to this other company. We need to do something that makes us different and try and regain control. And didn't work out well for them. Sometimes it does work out, sometimes it doesn't. And New Coke was one that definitely didn't do it. But now it seems like every year Coke's coming out with a new flavor.
They are.
Coke Orange, Coke Vanilla.
Yeah.
There's
Pumpkin spice.
There's Diet Coke
Pumpkin
with
spice. There's a
mandarin and grapefruit and lime, and they've got a wide variety. They do. So let me ask you this, Steve. We've talked about the cigar industry, the whiskey business, and everything else when it comes to trends versus tried and
Great
true.
podcast, Whiskey Business.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, great podcast.
Go ahead.
But how does it relate to everyday life in your mind?
So, I mean, okay. I would say it's good segue. It's interesting because it's not just everyday life, it's everything around you with business, with you can get into relationships, but I look at the overall concept of trends versus tried and true that you have to have, as we always talk about, a balance. Because if you jump all in, it's going to just be like fashion. You're going to look back and you're going to regret something. Mm-hmm. So, housing market, it wasn't that long ago that people were like, oh, I'm going to buy these houses, I'm going to fix them up because everyone's they're making a ton of money. And it's like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So you go and do it, and then you talk to them years later, like, yeah, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm working, in an office somewhere, it's all right, and all. It's like you tried, but you really didn't stick to what you know. You know what I mean? It wasn't. You thought it was like a quick. That's what I'll say is with trends. A lot of times when it comes to life, you think it's a quick fix. You want to jump in an industry. You want to get in the cigar industry. You want to get in the bourbon industry. It's like you want to be like at the top dog. Any business, you enter any industry, like, with Starbucks was one for you, Josh, is that you look at it as, and I'm not saying you didn't put in the time because you talk about almost 6 years. That's great. But if you have like a 20, at the time you probably would have been 23 and you wanted to do this, you would have succeeded most likely, but from somewhere up top that have been like, we got this other person over here that we'd like to bring in the program possibly. I'm not saying this is what happened, but it's like they're 34. They've had this experience outside of Starbucks. They've had this experience. They've got a resume that on paper especially just blows this in their mind maybe this 23, 24-year-old kid out of the water. And you don't get that chance, but at the same time, that person may have blown it as well. Because with you, I look at the trend of wanting to jump in and everything like that. The tried and true part of it is that experience that they're looking for, and it's an unfortunate way of looking at it for someone at that time in your position that you didn't have the chance to show them, maybe to the extent they wanted to, that the tried and true is always, when it comes to like business and other things, it's the hard work ethic. It's the genuine want to improve. It's the you want to build on top of it, but they may not see that because, people want to get. Starbucks was so trendy at the time. I mean, it was blowing up. So I can only imagine that stack of resumes, whether it be internal or external, for that type of program, it's thousands.
Sure.
Thousands.
Sure.
So, from that vantage point for you, it's man, I didn't get the shot. But from their standpoint, from a business, like I got people with like master's degrees that are coming in and they've been in this management program in a Fortune 500 company already, and they've done all this stuff, and this is a no-brainer to put them in this interview versus you. I mean, I think that's something that's the everyday life part of it, is that it's you can't lose it. And I think when I rattled off your experience now, it's a totally different resume. You've shown all that stuff. I mean, you've shown the tried and true side of it. Like, you didn't just go from job to job. Salespeople, for example, are like, you're in it for a year or two. I mean, you've seen this, Josh. I'm sure you've seen it, Dustin, and people out there have seen it, that they're in it for 2 years and they're not making six figures. They didn't get the promotion. So they're like, you know what? I see this other sales job. I'm going to go over here. And then 2 years later, they're doing the same thing again because they never stick with something. They don't have that loyalty that is the tried and true moral, if you will, that's how that works. Same thing with relationships. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, it's not going the way I want it to go, so I'm gonna, there's Tinder out there, there's Bumble and all that stuff, and it's like, I'm not happy, so I'm gonna break up with this person, and I'm gonna go and find one person out of all the sea of people out there, and then you see them a year or two later, and they've had 3 relationships because they're constantly looking for the next best thing. They're looking for that. You know what I mean?
So I mean, how much does that speak to our culture right now? Right, and it's a culture that we have created, whether it be nationally, as Americans, where what's the next best thing? What's the next best thing? And then that gets into the question of loyalty, right?
Yeah.
Too is that I pride myself on being loyal, right? And that's a huge characteristic of myself. I'm going to be loyal to where I'm at, right? In life, in business, and whatever happens, I'm in it for the long haul. Yeah. And I think we've gotten away from that as a society.
Loyalty,
right? Yeah, I mean, a little bit, I would say, and that goes into business as well, because exactly what you're talking about, right? It's somewhat of a trend where, hey, I'm gonna stay a year at this company, and if I don't like it, I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
If I don't see the growth, happen, then I'm moving on to the next, and I'm gonna see the grass is greener on the other side.
I think the happiest people I've talked to are sometimes they take the gamble. I mean, obviously there's no right answer to any of this stuff, but in career-wise, some of the people that are the happiest are the ones that they're doing it. They find themselves as being happy at a job, but at a certain point they catch wind of other opportunities, and then they get to a point where they're looking out there. You're like, I've had these 3% raises going for the last 5-10 years, and I look elsewhere, or someone tells me, hey, I just got hired on doing the same thing, and there's just better benefits, there's a better work culture, there's the pay is dramatically increased because you missed that boat because you have been loyal. So there's no right way to do it, but I think you're right in that sense that is that trendy, that's that society thing, that it's I need to be at this amount of income, this many kids, I need 2.4 kids, and I need a 3-car garage, and I need
2.4 kids.
Statistics. I'm saying,
okay.
like, I need the average.
I'm just trying to figure out how we're getting 4/10 of a kid.
That's the point, though. I mean, it's those types of things. It's the keeping up with the Joneses. I think that's the trends.
Yeah.
Over the when you talk about personal life, I think that's what that would be the most equivalent part of it to trends, is keeping up with the things you see. And obviously, you're bombarded by all of that all over. And it used to be your neighbors, or the people at your job, or your kids' parents, or kids' friends' parents. You know what I mean? Like the things that the people driving cars. Oh, that's a nicer car. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith just bought a new car. This is really. I mean, we should look at those. And you're like, what's wrong with our car now? You're like, well,
but go back and and look at culture and look at our parents, right? I mean. For example, personally, my dad's been at the same job for 30-some years now, right? He's worked for GE, for 30-some years, and I think that's rare right now. It's
very rare,
right? Where you'll see the same person at the same company for over 30 years, because that's the trend right now, and they're looking at all of the variables, that you talked about, and I think that that's all in a company culture and what is created.
Are you sure that's company versus as much as it is maybe the person growing up? Because I know I've been with Kroger for 14 years, probably.
Yeah.
It was my first job. Of course, growing up, my dad specifically told me, if you want your license, you got to get a job. And I said, okay, well, I'm not working fast food, and I'm not working at Kroger. It was a small town, so it's limited options. I told him, I'll fill out the application to Kroger to make you happy, but that's as far as it's getting. And 14 years later, and probably 10, 12 different stores, and I'm in management now and have done every role there is and that almost, except for, having my own store. It's, and there are days where, Steve, we've had long conversations, where I'm not happy with where I'm at, or, maybe had rough days, rough weeks, rough months, rough years. But at the end of the day, I've got a job. It pays. I'm not saying it pays well, but it pays. It pays the bills. It puts food on our table. And
pays well is all relative.
Exactly. It's all relative. And, you work within your means. To the point of your dad, Kathy, my fiance, her dad works for 7-Up. He's been there for over 40 years. And, he's doing the same thing. And, there's days he comes home and it's been a bad day at work. But, he does it because, it's good benefits, good, really good pay. And it's not any different than, where I'm at now. Benefits are pretty decent.
Yeah.
Pays all right. But at the end of the day, I've got a job. And, there's days where, I've thought about searching for other jobs. I've done it, but to me personally, I feel like it's more of a hassle to go through the whole job search all over again, and then to just I'm not saying deal with what I've got, but be happy and thankful for what I've got. And I think in today's society, there's so many people that aren't necessarily that way, and they're just looking for that next best thing, that next best opportunity. Is the grass greener on the other side? And It's not saying that it's not, but is it though? Because there's days, I tell people that work for me, it could be your dream job, but there's always going to be something or someone that you don't like.
But I look at, so Rob Wilson, I mean, to build off that, he said, loyalty is no longer valued nor rewarded. And that's kind of bringing it all together, right? And I think that one of the it's very cool to see, and I do listen to some of the podcasts out there about, entrepreneurship. When Jake's on here, he talks a lot about, kind of over the last year or two doing this is kind of that Instagram page about, entrepreneurship. And it's almost, it's misleading because even entrepreneurship, it's been around forever. That's what a lot of this country, I think, was founded on as far as a lot of businesses in this country. But now it's, you want to be an entrepreneur, and, for a period of time when Instagram was really, really blowing up, or Facebook, and all these things were blowing up, podcasts were blowing up, it was like, yeah, be an entrepreneur, be your own boss, don't work for someone else, and it's going to be so much better. You're going to have like this 6-7 figure income, and you're going to have all these cars and these beautiful women around you, beautiful scenery, beach houses, and all that stuff. That's not what that's about. I mean, it's obviously out there, and there are people that are able to accomplish that, but that's a trend that it's more of like that quick, I'm going to start my own business, and then in like 3 years, I'm going to be rich because I'm going to be my own boss. I don't have to answer to anyone. It's like, no, you actually have to answer to everyone. It was the exact opposite, because the way these people have been successful, in my opinion, are those characteristics that you guys are talking about, your parents, and even the generation before them. It was you're loyal, you work hard, you do it. And at the time, maybe you work for someone else because the opportunities weren't out there to start your own store. You're in a small town. It's like, well, I'm not going to start a hardware store because there's already a hardware store in this town, and that's it.
And then the Lowe's pops up.
There's one hardware store. You know what I mean? That's just how that worked. But with the development of those hard work characteristics, you know what I mean? The work ethic where you start from the bottom, like you guys are talking about with Kroger, Dustin. It's like you started in a Kroger somewhere.
Yeah.
And now you're working your way up in positions. There's you say it pays the bills. It pays the bills very well considering where you're at. Now, if you wanted to take a gamble and quit Kroger and start your own grocery store somewhere, or start with all that experience, you say, I want to start my own business based on all that. Now you have to be prepared typically to take basically 5 years out of your life, and now you want to talk about, paying the bills.
5 years with no pay at that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you talk about business, I think there's value to both sides of it. I mean, Josh, you're the same way. When you look at, again, what I kind of talked about with your resume there, it's now you're moving up with Altadis. In a period of less than 2 years, you've got this new opportunity where you're kind of doing double duty, but then there's other potential there. Because you stuck with it, your loyalty that you're talking about, Rob says, is no longer valued. You just have to surround yourself, just like anything else we talk about in this podcast, is you got to pick who you're surrounding yourself with. Amen. If the loyalty is not valued with the people around you, whether it be the people above you or underneath you or your coworkers at the same level, the people in your life, the family around you, the friends around you, the significant other around you, if the loyalty is not valued, if those core or tried and true characteristics of what I consider successful, and it's not about taking chances all the time, but about actually valuing the importance of other and helping people and doing that part of it. If that's not valued and the loyalty is not valued, then you need to find another surrounding. You do need to remove yourself from that. That's the reason to leave that job. Unless you can't, obviously we've talked about that. If that's your opportunity and you got bills to pay, you got kids in school, you got to do all this stuff, and taking that chance, you don't have the financial freedom to go ahead and take that gamble because there are people counting on you. And if you don't make any money, that 5 years we were talking about where you said, Dustin, that you don't make any money for 5 years, well, that may not be an option. That boat has sailed. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because now you got 2 kids that are counting on you to put clothing on their backs and food on the table and a roof over their head. You can't lose all that stuff just because you want to have a change in scenery in your life. But there are ways to do it. We've talked about it on here, is that you can actually keep your eye out for other opportunities, and then if you need to jump that ship, then you can. But again, it's surrounding yourself. In my opinion, it's changing your surroundings the best you can so that loyalty is valued. Because if you value that and you value that in other people, they're showing you that doesn't matter.
I think at the end of the day, though, you have to stay tried and true to your morals and your beliefs and what you feel is going to be best for you and most importantly, your family and your loved ones. You know, like you said, the people that you take care of, your kids, your family. Josh, you've got 2 kids. I've got one of my own. Every single day I get up and go to work, she's the first thing on my mind.
Right.
Before I even left the house today to come to here, she walked out to the car because I had to get something out of the other car. She goes, Daddy, let me help you put it in your car. I'm like, oh, okay. Nice. And the whole way pulling out of the driveway until I left our street, she's standing in the driveway, waving, blowing kisses. Like, it's
amazing.
It's a wonderful feeling. And every single day, I go to work, I think of the exact same thing. And it just, even if I have a shitty day at work, at the end of the day, I know I have her to come home to. And I do have a great job. I love what I do.
There you
Don't
go.
get me wrong. And, the story I'm at now, and, Craig, my story leader, tuned in earlier, and, I gave him a shout-out. But, I'm thankful to be working for him because he's a phenomenal leader, and I've learned a lot from him. And
I like that.
We get along very well. And I think, to your point, surrounding yourself by those people is huge. And, even if I do end up in another store, I hope to keep in contact with the managers that I've worked for, like Craig, and, previous managers that I've worked for that I've looked up to the most, because they're the ones who you've gained the most from, either personally and in the business world and your job and professionally. So I think, to your point, Steve, that's huge.
Well, I think to both of your points, I think, what you guys are talking about, and we haven't put a term to it, but it's a mentor. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're finding yourself.
Say that again, will you, Josh?
A mentor and
a mentor or mentor?
Yeah. Mentor, Ohio, not to be confused with mentor. A mentor. Yeah. I mean, if you don't find yourself a mentor in the organization that you're with, that you look up to, right, that will help guide you, right, to what you want to become, it's very easy to jump ship. It's very easy to follow that trend of, hey, I've got this opportunity, I'm going to jump on it. I've had that opportunity where people have reached out to me and hey, we want you to become part of our organization. Well, I'm okay with where I'm at, right? I like where I'm at. I appreciate where I'm at. I have growth opportunities where I'm at, and I have a mentor, right, where I'm at, and that person is helping guide and bring you to where you yearn to be, right, where you want to become. And the trend right now, exactly what you're talking about, Steve, is entrepreneurship, right? So who's your mentor in that situation, right? If your mentor's Gary
right.
V, right? Hey,
He's changed his message, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I want to hear what you have to say, but like, I mean, hey, school is not necessary. Hey, do something that you love. Hey, well, that's good and all, but yeah, you got 5 years without pay doing something that you want to love, but you don't yet love, or maybe you started out loving it and then just absolutely hate it, right? Because you're trying to do what you want to do. And yeah, there are a ton of people that become that, right? That get to that level, right? And, my hat off to them, right? You did what you wanted to do, and you've become what you've wanted to become. But I think the leadership in your organization is big, and that goes along with the culture of your organization, which, I talked about before.
It trickles down from the leadership.
Right.
To be honest with you, the culture, and, I talk about it in each of the stores I've been in. And, each culture in the store is different, and it starts with the leadership, at both at store level and even above that, because the top of the store level, their culture comes from the people that are above them. And if they're not getting the culture that they want, then they're going to have to find ways that they can change the culture in that store to get it to where it needs to be and it should be, to benefit them. And by them, I mean the store. I don't mean the leadership, because at least in my realm, when I go to a store, I always tell the associates that, it's their store. I'm just here to help. Help you to help you run it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're going to run all over me, but it's a lot easier for me to transform my management style than it is for me to change 160 to 200 associates' mentality and style and their workmanship, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to change all of that.
Right.
It's there was a book, and I'm not an OSU football fan. Everyone can boo all they want.
We're worldwide, so you're safe saying
yeah,
that.
it's okay. So, but there is a book that Urban Meyer put out. And it's, from what I've heard, it's a really great book. I've not had the chance to read it.
Okay.
But he talks a lot about leadership, and even in the team aspect, that you have to break it down to percentages. You're going to have that 10% that's always constantly going to go above and beyond for you, and then you have that 10% that's going to always be nothing but bringing up the rear, and you're not going to be able to get a lot from them. So where should you focus your leadership?
Yeah,
on that
80-20 rule. Yeah,
on that 80% that you may be able to sway into that top 10%. You're not going to be able to move all of it, but if you direct your focus to that, that's where you're going to have the largest impact.
Well, that's what the common thing that happens is, you, as management, as leaders, you are, just because of the way it works, unfortunately, you are spending 80% of your time on the bottom 10%. I mean, that's just the way it works, because you're counseling, you're going through all the, I gotta sit down with this person, talk to them about what they're doing wrong, or what you're not buying into it. So it's a very tough thing to do. Nate, go ahead, and then I wanted to say something.
Well, we've talked a little bit about people or industries that will leave the tried and true and go into a trend. But what about the other way? What causes people or industries or companies within an industry to buck the trend and return to the tried and true?
Well, real quick, I mean, there's a good term, and it's vision, right? And that whether it be company vision or organizational vision, and what happens is that vision leaks through those leaders, right? And when you're a good leader, you're leaking that vision to whatever you want to say, the people under you, right? The people that come to you, and they're seeing that vision, whether again it's your company's vision or the culture that your company has created. But oftentimes every company has a vision, right? And that vision leaks through you as a leader.
Yeah, and I think that to your question, Nate, going back to the tried and true, I don't think those if you're not going to be that stubborn person that you ignore all the trends, I think it's something that you have to be. Again, it's all about awareness. So I don't think anyone that is long-term, truly successful, that you ignore all the trends. You don't ignore or the fads to that point. You might entertain it, but there's a mix there. I go back to my statement earlier, is that you have to be aware of the trends, but you also have to stick to what you know has worked. So you have to have that awareness, and hopefully you have the ability to have a little bit of tracking there where you know what has worked, and you know what, again, the core values. We're staying on business a lot here, is that, and I don't know if Altadis has this, I assume they do, but is a mission statement. Core values. Core values is something that's very, very important, and that's coming from the leadership. I was going to bring up, and we can dive into this in just a moment here, but when Josh was talking about having a mentor, it was in business. That's any part of life. You want to be in a successful marriage, a successful family, and all that stuff. You don't necessarily talk to someone that's happy right now, but typically they're not. That's the trend. You know what I mean? Or it's like, divorce got very popular because people were bailing on marriages, and I am divorced, so I mean, I'm not saying that qualifies me for saying that, but if you want to talk to someone, you look at that person that's been married or been working at a job for 30 years. You ask them how it worked. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will then be married for 30 years or you'll be working for 30 years, but at least you open yourself up to that, and you're not just listening to or having your eyes open for the people that are in your surroundings, which your surroundings now is Facebook, Instagram, everything else. So your surroundings are vast.
Right.
And it's boring. It's coming back. That's one of the interesting things.
Right.
One of the trends now I see coming back, like with relationships and jobs, is that, oh my gosh, this person's been with this other person for 25 years. That's so sweet. I wish I had that. Well, ask them how that worked. It's the tried and true. It's the hard work. It's the communication. It's the listening to the other person. It's the sacrificing. It's all the things that when you're not happy with the job, you're not happy with the relationship, that you're like, I'm out. Fuck this. Like, this is terrible. And it's like, you ask that person that's been working at that job for 30 years, been in a relationship for 30 years, stuck to tried and true, you know what I mean? Didn't listen to the trends or all that stuff, that it's okay to walk away from this just because you're unhappy that morning or for that week. It's like, no, someone that's been that successful in whatever the endeavor is, relationships, friendships, houses, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't just move when, their basement flooded, like, I'm out, this is stupid. It's like, no, you stick with it.
Right.
Because that's what leads to that long-term success. It's that same ethics, the same morals, the same hard work, communication, that balance with everything else. But with the business, I always say, I look at it as you use the trends to accomplish your tried and true. You can't be stubborn and just ignore all of this stuff. You have to be constantly growing and learning from your surroundings and what's going on around you, whether it be, especially when it's the industry, for example, that you're in. If you just like, you know what, like you look at something like Barnes & Noble, when Amazon was coming out with, what was it, the Kindle. They were the Kindle. Barnes & Noble was
Barnes & Noble was the Nook.
The Nook.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever happened with that, but I know that Barnes & Noble is still open across the street from us, and they are really big into books because their Nook fell on their face. Because he's like, you know what, I'm going to do what the iPad's doing, but no, I'm not going to do all the apps. I'm not going to make it really like an all-inclusive tablet. It's just going to be like an electronic book because people love books. And it's like, yeah, people love books. They don't want an iPad that you can just read books on. And they spent billions of dollars on this, this thing, and he's like, I'm going to revolutionize this. It's like, no, you're not. I appreciate the fact that he listened to the trends around him and he stuck to his tried and true, but it was a little bit closed-minded because you weren't really listening to what's actually getting popular and doing an all-inclusive type of a device. He would have been smarter if he went to like Steve Jobs and was like, hey, look, let's do
partner.
this. So all your books app, I want Barnes & Noble to be able to sell books on your books app. But, I don't think they did that, and I think that's where you had the shortcoming, is because you listened to it, but you didn't really stick to what's actually happening around you.
The iPad was just on the cusp of coming out at that point, I think. Yeah. Or not out.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I did a whole group project on the book industry in college. Yeah, it was like, because I went to OU. So, yeah, I'm sorry you went to Miami. I'm just kidding.
That's all right.
But no, surrounded by Red Hawks.
I know. I'm the only Bobcat here. But no, I actually did the whole as part of my business degree. They called it like the business block or something like that. And it was, each group who did it, it was a different industry. And the one we had was the book industry. And at the time, Borders was still open.
Yeah.
And any group that got stuck with Borders, I looked at them like, I'm so sorry. Because we brought up all their financials, and it was just nothing but red at that point. And the Nook had just come out. The iPad was either just coming out or not had been out yet. It was rumors at the point. And the Kindle had been out, and so it was a lot of, Barnes & Noble versus Amazon, and Borders versus Amazon. And a lot of us all had the same fruition that if Barnes & Noble does not go with Kindle as far as having the functionality and all the different things that the Kindle had, they were going to be in trouble. And now you can't find a Nook anywhere, and if you do, it doesn't work.
Yeah. But
I think taking that mentorship a step further, right? A mentor is somebody who's often inside of your industry, right?
Doesn't always have to be, though.
You're correct. Not always, but personally, taking that a step further, I have personally a board of directors over my life. So what I mean by that is I have a board that I go to, and that sounds very official, right? But I mean, it's not as official as it sounds. Yeah, we don't all get around, but I have a group of people who I look up to that are either equal or above me in business, in life. My grandpa, my dad, so and so that I go to for advice.
Yeah.
Or any, business situation that I am looking to make, whether that be in a career or wherever that takes me, that I'll go to, hey, what do you think of this decision? What do you think of this situation that I might be making? And I allow them to speak into my life in that particular situation. And I think that has boded me well.
Well, again, you're surrounding yourself, and that's what I was saying about the mentor part of it. Is that it's anything. It's not just the business side of it.
Yeah.
For you with your personal life, I mean, yeah, you might even have people in your industry, with the cigars that have a healthy thing when you're on the road all the time. We didn't dive into it, but I mean that's one of the things I like about the tried and true is people to people. It's constant knowing how to have conversations, knowing how to listen, knowing how to actually have a sit down face to face as opposed to just texting, just all of that stuff. But when you have that, when you look at your board of directors, which I like a lot in your personal life, that's a great. I love that. I mean, I hope everyone listening actually
analogy
takes that as something that they can try to form on their own. Is no matter if it's business, personal. Or and I say personal, not just relationships, but when you're going through something as a man, as a woman, as you're growing up, there are people that you trust that you can talk to them. If you don't feel like you can talk to people about it, then you're selling yourself short at that point,
right?
Because you won't learn because you're trying to take it on yourself. And again, I think it was last week or the week before, I was like, a man can't be an island, a person can't be an island,
right? Because
if you do that, you're going to go fucking insane.
Yeah.
You're going to be reinventing the wheel. I brought up last week, it was that same thing about, like Tom Hanks on, I mean, that epic scene where he's like, he made fire. Like if you're trying to make fire because you're keeping it that far in that you're not going to listen to what's going on outside of you and you're not going to listen to like the trends, you're not going to listen to like what's going on. You're like, no, I'm going to do it my own way. You will fail.
Right.
Because you don't have the ability, you're not letting yourself have the ability to talk to your board of directors of mentors in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
Because it's been done before. I'm sorry. Not your situation may be unique, but of the how many people, billions, I say 7 billion people in the world, does anyone know? 7 billion people in the world. I'm pretty sure someone has gone through something 99% the same that you're going through. Now, you may not know that person, but I'm sure it's happened before.
Right.
History has a way of repeating itself, and you are no exception.
Yeah.
So, closing remarks. What do you think?
I think that really transitions well. I think, Josh, we'll let you close it out first, and then we'll just work our way on down the line. And, Steve, you cap it all
Sure.
off for the evening. So, Josh, what will be your closing remarks on the whiskey, the cigar that we had tonight, the H. Upmann 175th anniversary, which was phenomenal, I might add.
I'm
and
still
the topic.
smoking it.
I literally just got down to the end where I couldn't smoke it anymore.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, wonderful. I hope you guys all enjoyed it from what it sounds like you guys did. This was out of my personal collection.
Oh, you make it so much more personal. So yeah.
The H. Upmann
So we should kill the
175th,
bottle.
So,
I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
No, he's talking about the cigars.
The bottle
Oh.
too, but,
I thought you were only given one cigar.
What's that?
You bought these? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean I was gifted them.
Oh god.
But
tastes so much better.
it
I
was.
love the taste of gift.
No, but I really do hope you guys enjoyed them tonight, and I would urge all you guys to go out to your local brick and mortar, try the H. Upmann 175th, phenomenal cigar, well done on all aspects of
Absolutely.
it, from our company, Rafael Nadal, and blending it with
Not the
AJ.
tennis player.
Not the tennis player, but and let us know what you think of it. I want to know what your guys' palate got out of it, and comment on this feed. Let us know what you think of it. Let your brick and mortar store know what you thought of it. You're not going to be disappointed. I will tell you that. It was a phenomenal pairing with the EH Taylor Rye. So I'm definitely glad we got to finally partake in that and pair it up with this unbelievable cigar. It's just been such a fire year. With Altadis and our offerings, so much more good stuff to come. We released the H. Upmann Espanol, which we didn't get to because we were smoking the Churchill tonight.
That's coming up next, though. I'm smoking that still tonight.
A phenomenal cigar again. Rolled. We didn't get into it, but rolled utilizing tobacco that was fermented a different way, which we'll get onto. Hopefully you'll get onto it.
Let's feature that another week.
Yeah. And maybe I can get onto that one. I don't know. We'll see how the schedule permits.
It.
But
We'll get Paul to do that one.
Yeah. Maybe we'll
Paul
bring
do that one.
Paul on. Yeah. The Trinidad that we released at the trade show.
Another
the
beautiful
Spiritu.
smoke. I had that last week.
Oh, unbelievable. It's been such a phenomenal year with Altadis and our offerings. So, I'm proud to be part of a company that has really, gotten back to, if you will, the passion, with what we're putting into, the cigars and the blending, what the group of De Maestros are doing at Tabacalera Garcia, with the 50th anniversary and the Monte Cristo 50. If you can find that at your brick and mortars, another unbelievable cigar. You find it at the Tinder Box. No, I really appreciate you guys having me on. Awesome conversation tonight. Trends versus the tried and true. I think we dove into it and all aspects of life. If you don't stay up on the trends, I think you're going to lose out. In both business and life, but the tried and true are always going to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Again, Josh, thank you so much for the cigar. This 175th was phenomenal. I would have to agree with everyone here. The pairing with the Straight Rye was lights out. I would love to revisit it again mid-late October. It's a little bit cooler out. I think it would also still be just as good, if not even better.
I don't know if we're going to find another bottle of that.
I may know a guy.
Oh, okay. Good.
I could search around. I'm sure I could probably find one somewhere. But the Straight Rye is also always a great solid choice. So if you do find one or see one on the shelf, snag it. I think the most I seen it for was on the shelf in Florida for $100. Even that it's a little bit of a reach at that point, but get it because you're probably not going to find it anywhere else.
I'm going to have a little bit more before we close out here.
As far as the topic goes, trends versus tried and true. Honestly, I believe sticking to your roots is very important. I really love the song "Roots" by Zach Brown Band.
Yeah.
Every time it comes on, I always, I get chills, and just it hits home for me. It always recenters myself. I always, I think back to, me growing up and, how I was raised and that work ethic, especially if I am at work and, that song comes on, or, I'm at the gym,
Yeah.
And that song comes on. It really kind of empowers me, and it just really allows me to dig down deeper and stick to what I know. But that does not mean that you can't form to change, and the things that are going on around you. So if there are trends that are coming along and they are around to stay, take notice of that. Take notice of it and make changes in your life that you need to do, whether it be at work, school, home, whatever it may be. And make those changes that fit for you to where it still sticks to your core, but it allows you to adapt to what's going on. And really look at that. But at the end of the day, always make sure that you take that moment to recenter and, Steve, your motto to focus.
Right.
I think refocus
I use that too.
Is a good one. That's your second
Yeah.
motto. You focus in the
Small
morning.
RE.
Yeah, focus in the morning and then refocus in the afternoon. But really use that time to refocus, recenter yourself, and find what it is that is tried and true for yourself.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned adapt, and there's a I know of it in the business world is there is a saying that you adapt or die. When we're talking about tried and true, if you stick to I'm going to stick to my guns, I'm going to ride this wave out. If you don't adapt to things around you will essentially be alone in business and life and everything else. Nate, what do you want to say?
Well, when we were first talking about the topic last night, the very first thing that came to my mind was if you always live by the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you're never going to experience anything new. You're never going to have a new idea or try anything different.
Well, and that's all relative if you don't think it's broke, but if everyone around you does, you need to fix it. But the trend versus fad thing, I think that was a comment that I really liked, that part of the conversation, because the trends are not just about that. I don't want anyone to ever, and I have to remind myself the same thing, is you don't just jump all the way in. When you look at like the fashion trend we were talking about, we didn't even bring up the diet, nutrition trends. My God, you give it enough
Keto.
time. I'm not going to bring up any specifics. And if you have success with that and you're jumping all in, if you go 100% in, there will be a matter of time, whether it be 6 months, 6 years, something, you're going to have health problems because you have completely eliminated parts of your diet because you jumped 100% in and ignore the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. And I don't care if you bring up, oh, yeah, cavemen used to do this. And it's like, yeah, they died. You know what I mean? Their lifespan was very, very short. So, you have to reintroduce some new things that are happening around you. But I will say that as a summary, my biggest thing is I like the board of directors thing in your personal life. I look at that as a very, very much trumped version of mentors. It's having that mentality of learning from others, and that's part of the trends versus tried and true. What Nate just said as well. But I mean, there has to be a point that you are constantly adapting, you're constantly learning, you're constantly growing. But if you combine that with your tried and true, what you know has worked, that's the part of it, is that you're not completely changing. You're not going off the reservation. You're not gonna just completely say, you know what, forget this. I'm not doing it. I'm gonna completely change 180. That's not even, if things are going bad, I don't think that's going to be the answer there. You have to adapt. That's the key term of this, is for me, is trends versus tried and true. It's about adapting. It's about getting to the point where you take things that you know have worked, and whether or not you have learned that yourself or you've learned it from your board of directors, as Josh said, which I still love that. I think that's a T-shirt right there. We talk about T-shirts. That's one of them. Find your board of directors. Mm-hmm. I really think that is a big combination of both aspects. Is that there's not one right way or wrong way. It's not trends versus tried and true that you have to pick one. it's combining those things, and that's what I like about it. And I mean, when we get into the conversation about the bourbons, the whiskeys, and all that stuff, that's exactly what these successful companies are doing. They're not reinventing the wheel. They are not finding fire for the first time. They are actually finding the trends that are going on, and they are adapting and building off of what they know works. And they're seeing other people do it, and they're like, if that works, we can do it this way. So, I mean, I will say that with our sponsors, with Altadis being the present sponsor and a big sponsor, and I appreciate it. We're working on the agreement to continue this sponsorship and the relationship, and I love having Josh in here, and you're welcome anytime. Whether you're on the podcast, in the garage, or in the area, you want to try the whiskey that we're drinking that night, have you on in the garage. But, I mean, you guys have done it with all of these things, and you talked about the trends. I mean, again, getting AJ involved, getting all these guys involved in Nicaragua. It's the fact you said you don't have a factory in Nicaragua, and you're one of the biggest companies in the world when it comes to this industry. You're adapting, and it shows. And I think that's something that you're going to get some new people that are finding some of these old, quote, old, end quote, brands that my dad or my grandfather used to smoke, or whoever it is in the family, and now you got guys and girls smoking Upmanns, you got guys and girls smoking Monte Cristos, you got all these things like, oh, AJ makes Trinidad, yeah, exactly. So you're bringing this back to the fold. Bourbons are doing the same thing, but thank you very much, Altadis, for everything. Josh, more importantly, thank you for your personal collection. This EH Taylor, like I said, straight rye. You didn't believe that I had it in the basement still, and it was almost a full bottle, but I don't think I drank it. I think it was that night.
I think we cracked the seal, but nothing was poured out of it.
There was a little bit poured.
Okay.
But I want to thank them, and I want to thank Tinder Box at Easton for always supporting us. Again, that's where we all came out of, and that's what brought us all together and brought all of you guys to be included in this podcast. That's where it all comes from. So Tinder Box at Easton, Brian, you want to talk to an entrepreneur that's been doing it for 20 years, and he'll be the first to tell you, like any entrepreneur, it is hard work, and it's the hardest job that someone can ever have is to be an entrepreneur. We were talking about that earlier. So, I mean, that's someone that if you want to find a mentor in your organization or someone in your group that you look up to or you can learn from, you don't have to do it the same way. That's not what a mentor means. It's about the fact that you look at what they've learned and then try to combine that with what you're going through. And then BS Cigar Company, which is something that's coming out of all this as well. So thank you very much to BS Cigar Company. So, Josh, thank you. We had a couple people from your company that have been chiming in. So Alex just said, great summary, guys. Way to represent Josh. That's awesome. The support's there. We had a lot of people from the industry. We had a lot of people from all over the world that are commenting. Jason Williams, thank you for tuning in. And really, he said, Josh, drink some more. So we'll see if we can get Josh another glass after we're done. We're done recording. But thank you guys very much. Facebook Live, if you guys are on the audio, if you can check us out, that's where we have a lot of our fun is on the Wednesday nights, and now it's going to be Thursday nights again going forward next week. We've got Doug Ruffalo, who is part of the community here in Columbus, that's going to be joining us. We are going to be unboxing, I'm looking at it right now, something from Stogie Birds. Sam Lucia, you mentioned Nub Cigars earlier. Yeah. This is where we're at. Go ahead and put it in front of the camera. We have this mystery box of stuff from Sam Lucia. You're just showing him a box. Yeah, that's nice. Thank you, Vanna White.
Bird in the tape. He's got his own personalized tape.
And for those of you on audio, like I said, thank you guys. Subscribe, support, like, review, all that stuff. If you guys can share, this is how it grows, and we're having fun with it. So, again, Josh, Dustin, thank you. Dustin, thank you for filling in for Jake. Jake will be back next week.
Absolutely.
Nate, thank you for being behind the board as always and chiming in on the microphone. I love that feature. And to our studio audience, thank you very much for the dozens and dozens of people in my garage. I need to get a bigger house, get a pole barn or something like that for all these people here. So, guys, cheers.
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 Absolutely.
All you guys, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on, guys. Shout out to all the Altadis USA folks tuning in, and Tim, Paul, Alex, anybody else that I was missing. Appreciate you guys and all the other listeners. So
absolutely.
We'll catch you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.